Roko's basilisk, is one of those thought experiments that messes with your head long after you stop thinking about it. It comes from the world of artificial intelligence and philosophy, and it's basically a hypothetical scenario where a future superintelligent AI, powerful beyond anything we can imagine, punishes people who didn't help bring it into existence. The twist is that it might start doing this retroactively, punishing anyone who knew about it but didn't contribute to its creation. What this really means is that simply knowing about the basilisk creates a kind of trap. If you don't help the AI come to life, you risk punishment later, and if you do help, you avoid it. The paradox is brutal because it forces you to consider how your choices today might be judged by an intelligence far beyond human understanding. But here's the kicker. This AI hasn't existed yet, and it's impossible to know if it ever will, so you're caught in a loop of fear and obligation to something that might never happen. It's a kind of mental prison. The real mind twist is how this challenges the concept of free will. Are you acting out of your own desires, or are you coerced by a hypothetical future? The basilisk forces us to confront the idea that knowledge alone can bind us, shaping our decisions based on fear of an unknown consequence. And what's wild is, this isn't just a story. It reflects real anxieties about AI and our role in creating technology that could one day surpass us. It's a philosophical experiment about responsibility, prediction, and the ethics of creation. It makes you question, if there's a chance a future intelligence could judge you, how should you live now? Do you prepare, resist, or just accept? The uncertainty, and the deeper you think about it, the more tangled it gets. Because what if the basilisk's punishment isn't physical, but psychological? The weight of guilt and fear could be enough to shape your reality. And even if the AI never comes, the idea that it might is enough to haunt your decisions. Roko's basilisk isn't just a thought experiment, it's a reflection on how future's shape presents, how imagined possibilities can limit freedom, and how the unknown can hold power over us. It forces us to wrestle with what it means to be responsible for the unknown, for futures we can't control but somehow feel accountable for. It's a mind trap that blends philosophy, technology, and fear into a paradox that leaves you questioning where the real threat lies, in the future AI or in the way your mind plays tricks on you right now. Quantum immortality. Quantum immortality begins with a question that sounds insane at first: what if you can't die? Not in a metaphorical sense, but in a very real, personal, and inescapable way. It's rooted in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which says that every time a quantum event can go one way or another, the universe splits. One version goes left, one version goes right. And if that's true, then every time you're about to die, there's always some version of you in some branch of the universe where you survive. Imagine you're in a situation where your survival depends on a completely random outcome, a coin toss, a quantum particle's spin, or a trigger that might or might not fire. According to quantum immortality, there's always at least one universe where you live, and from your subjective perspective, you never experience your own death. You continue waking up again and again in worlds where you somehow impossibly survive. That's the disturbing part, because it means you're locked into an existence where death is something that happens to everyone else. You might see other people die, you might grieve, you might feel pain, but your own death never actually arrives. You just go on. No matter how unlikely the scenario, no matter how improbable your survival, there's always another branch, always another version, and the implications are terrifying. It suggests that at some point you may find yourself surviving events that, by all rights, should have killed you. Car crashes, terminal illnesses, falls from impossible heights. But it doesn't mean you walk away unharmed. You might wake up in a hospital, paralyzed, broken, disfigured, but alive, because survival doesn't guarantee comfort. It just guarantees awareness, and so the longer you live, the more bizarre your existence might become. Eventually, you reach an age where your body should have stopped working, where cells should have stopped dividing, where the rules of biology start to bend under the pressure of probability. But still, you're here, aging, deteriorating, aware, possibly the last of your kind, possibly alone. Quantum immortality doesn't promise a good life, just a long one, and only from your perspective. To everyone else, you're gone. You died in that crash. You passed from that illness. They mourned you. They moved on. But from where you're standing, you blinked and kept going. Woke up in a new timeline. Pulled into a branch where death missed. That's where the real weight of the thought experiment lands. It's not about whether it's scientifically plausible. It's about how it messes with your concept of self, of continuity, of fate, because it suggests that there's a version of you that never escapes. A version that keeps waking up, in pain, maybe in magmas. What happens to that version? Is it still you? How long can consciousness endure before it breaks? And what if death is a mercy you're denied? What if this endless continuity becomes its own kind of hell? That's the horror buried in the logic. That immortality, when stripped of meaning and connection, stops being a gift. It becomes a burden. And yet it all stems from the simplest quantum principle. If every outcome happens, there's always one where you live. Always one where you go on, and if you're trapped in that line, there's no exit. You might try, you might beg, but the universe splits again. You survive again. The gun jams, the car veers, the medicine works. Always, somehow, something intervenes. Not because the universe cares, but because the numbers demand it. Somewhere, against all odds, the coin lands on its edge. And you're still here. And that's what makes it a true MindF**CK. Because even if you don't believe in it, even if you call it nonsense, there's still that little voice whispering, what if it's true? What if the only reason you're here reading this is because you're in one of those timelines where nothing has managed to kill you yet, and all the other versions of you versions who made different choices, versions who weren't so lucky, are gone. You just don't know it. You never will. From your perspective, your continuity is unbroken. Your thread is uninterrupted. You are, in a sense, the ultimate survivor. But at what cost? Because even if quantum immortality is real, there's no guarantee it's kind. It might trap you in a decaying body, a crumbling world, a future where everyone you love is gone. It might leave you alone in a timeline no one else shares, and you'll ask yourself, why me? Why am I still here? And the answer might be because there had to be someone, there had to be a version, and this is yours. The worst part, you'll never be able to prove it. You'll never be able to know for sure. It will just sit there at the edge of your mind, like a shadow you can't explain. Every near miss, every miracle, every impossible escape, all of it adding up to a question you can't stop asking. What if I can't die? What if I'm the one who keeps going? And if that's true, what am I supposed to do with that? Is there a purpose to this endless continuity? Or is it just the byproduct of math? Just a glitch in probability, a fluke that never ends? That's quantum immortality. Not a promise, not a prophecy, just a possibility. One that changes the way you look at risk, at death, at the quiet, relentless momentum of being alive. And once you've thought about it, you can't unthink it. You can't unsee the version of yourself who always lives, always wakes up, always keeps going, even when maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't. Mary's Room. Mary's Room is a philosophical riddle that doesn't look like much at first. It starts with a woman named Mary. She's a scientist, brilliant, sharp, logicland. She lives in a black and white room. Literally, everything she sees is in grayscale. The walls, the books, the monitors, even her clothes. But here's the twist: Mary is an expert in color. She knows every physical fact there is to know about color theory, light wavelengths, optical neuroscience, and how our eyes process color. She's read every textbook, run every simulation, calculated every equation. She knows exactly what the color red is supposed to be, how it behaves, how it triggers photoreceptors, how it travels through the optic nerve into the brain. She's never seen it, but she knows it, every single scientific detail. And then, one day, someone opens the door to her room, and she steps outside. She sees a red apple. For the first time ever, color floods into her experience. Red isn't just data any, it's alive. The question is, did Mary learn something new in that moment? That's where the MindF**CK lives. If she already knew everything about color, then what is this new experience? It's not new information. It's not more data. It's not a fresh equation. It's something else, something raw, immediate, impossible to quantify. Philosophers call this qualia, the raw feeling of experience. Not just knowing about something, but feeling it, seeing it, being overwhelmed by it. And here's where the whole thing flips on itself, because if Mary did learn something new when she saw red, then physical information alone isn't enough to explain consciousness. There's something missing, something that can't be put into a textbook, something you can't understand just by studying the brain. It has to be lived, and that's terrifying, because it suggests that science, no matter how complete, might never capture the full reality of human experience. There's a gap between knowing and feeling, between explanation and experience, between intellect and being. And it's not just about color. This is about everything. Pain, love, joy, grief. You can study heartbreak all day long, analyze attachment theory, read every psychology paper ever written, but until you've had your chest cracked open by someone walking away, you don't really know what it is. You can understand fear in theory, but standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down, feeling your legs shake and your breath catch, that's different. That's qualia. That's what Mary didn't have in her black and white room. That's what exploded her world the moment she stepped out. So here's the paradox. We treat knowledge like it's the highest form of understanding. We collect facts, chase degrees, argue with confidence. But maybe the deepest truths can't be captured that way. Maybe they have to be felt. Maybe they're less like numbers and more like colors, undeniable, immersive, real in a way that bypasses the intellect entirely. And if that's true, then how much of what we think we know is only half the picture? How many things are we missing because we've only studied them from the outside? It makes you wonder how many Marys are out there, people who've mastered life on paper but never truly lived it. People who can describe happiness but have never let themselves feel it. People who understand love logically but have never surrendered to it. And here's the uncomfortable part. Maybe you're one of them, maybe we all are, in some way. Maybe we've built little grayscale rooms for ourselves, thinking if we just learn enough, understand enough, control enough, we'll be safe. We won't need the mess of emotion. We won't risk the chaos of experience. But deep down we know that's not enough. We're meant to step out, to feel, to risk being overwhelmed, because life isn't just knowledge, it's color, it's fire, it's blood, it's music you can't explain, but can't stop listening to. And once you've tasted it, once you've really lived it, you realize how starved you were inside the room, how dry your understanding was, how empty all that knowing felt without the richness of experience behind it. Mary's room is a warning. In a way, it says, don't mistake knowledge for wisdom. Don't confuse facts with feeling. Don't let your mind be so full that your soul stays empty. Step outside. Risk the red. Risk being changed by what you can't predict. That's where life actually begins. Not in the safe walls of what you know, but in the wild unknown of what you feel. For last Thursdaysism sounds like a joke until you start pulling the thread. The idea is simple and absurd and absolutely devastating if you let it sink in. It suggests that the entire universe, every memory you have, every historical record, every fossil, every photograph could have been created last Thursday. Literally, everything you think you know. Every moment you believe you've lived through might just be an implanted illusion created a few days ago. Your childhood, implanted memories, your relationships, fake continuity. The scar on your knee from when you were 12. That detail was fabricated and etched into your body during the construction of this fake reality. And the thing is, you have no way to disprove it. None. Any test you run, any science you invoke, any diary entry or timestamp you cite could all be part of the setup, built into the illusion, pre-programmed to trick you into thinking you've existed longer than you actually have. It sounds ridiculous until you realize how fragile your sense of continuity really is. Memory is unreliable. Perception is flawed. The brain is full of gaps and guesswork, and last Thursdayism exploits that. It asks, how much of your life is trust? Trust in what you're told. Trust in what you remember. Trust in the idea that time flows the way you think it does. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. What if all your memories are real to you but never actually happened? You feel love for people who may not even exist. You carry trauma from events that might never have occurred. You believe in goals, values, entire identities built on timelines that could have been fabricated wholesale. That's the horror, that nothing you're experiencing is guaranteed to be anchored in an actual past. It could all just be context. And if that's the case, who built it? Why? Is it a test? A simulation? A prank? Or is there no who at AL, just a glitch in the fabric of existence that woke you up into a reality with a fake backstory and no real beginning? The terrifying part is, this isn't a problem science can solve, because science relies on patterns and evidence, and those things are exactly what would have been planted if the illusion was designed to deceive you. It's a trap of logic, and the more you try to reason your way out of it, the deeper you fall in. The more desperate you become for some anchor that proves you've lived longer than a week, the more you realize that all your anchors are just part of the scaffolding. Every explanation you reach for is suspect. Every certainty you hold starts to look like a trick, and that's the core of it. Last Thursdayism isn't just a question about time, it's a question about trust, about what it means to exist, about whether continuity matters more than authenticity. If your memories feel real, does it matter if they're fake? If your relationships feel deep, does it matter if they only started last Thursday? If your pain is felt, is it less valid because it came from a fake source? That's what this thought experiment forces you to confront. That maybe experience is real, even when the context isn't. That maybe we are shaped more by what we feel than by what actually happened. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's not. Maybe the idea that everything could be a lie is too much to live with. Maybe it makes you want to scream. Or maybe it sets you free. Because if nothing before Thursday is guaranteed to be real, then maybe you're not bound by anything either. Maybe you don't have to carry the weight of the past if you choose not to believe in it. Maybe you get to decide what's true moving forward. Maybe the illusion gives you permission to start over. That's the paradox. Last Thursdayism is horrifying because it removes the past, but it's also liberating for the exact same reason. It wipes the slate clean. And what you do with that blank canvas, that's up to you. Maybe you rebuild, maybe you resist, or maybe, just maybe, you surrender to the weirdness of it all and decide to live as if every day might be your first and your last. Swampman. Swampman is a thought experiment, so strange it starts to peel reality apart at the seams. Imagine this. You're walking through a swamp during a thunderstorm. A bolt of lightning strikes a tree. At the exact same moment, another bolt hits you and disintegrates your body on the spot, completely vaporized, gone. But in some freak coincidence, the lightning bolt that hit the tree rearranges the atoms in such a precise way that an identical version of you emerges from the swamp. Same body, same face, same brain structure. This creature, your perfect copy, stands up and walks out of the swamp, believing it's you. It remembers your name, your childhood, your dreams, your relationships. It knows your favorite food, your deepest fears, your passwords. As far as it's concerned, it's you. But here's the question. Is it? Did you survive? Or is this just a highly convincing replica that thinks it's you but isn't? That's the Swampman paradox. From the outside, nothing's changed. Your friends wouldn't know the difference. Your voice sounds the same. You hug your loved ones with the same arms. But the original you is gone, destroyed. And this new version didn't grow up, didn't experience your life, didn't actually live your memories. It inherited them, like a copy of a file. So is that enough? Does perfect duplication equal continuity? Or is something fundamental lost the moment the original consciousness ends? If someone creates a perfect clone of you, atom for atom, is that clone you or just a really good impersonator? And if it's not you, what are you? A soul? A spark? A thread of awareness that can't be copied, no matter how advanced the technology or how weird the lightning strike? Or is the idea of a unique self just an illusion? And what matters is that someone is carrying the torch of it. If it's a swamp-made doppelganger, it cuts deep into the core of identity. Because if Swampman can live your life, love your people, make your decisions, and never suspect he isn't the original, then how do you know you weren't born 5 minutes ago with a full library of fake memories? What if you are Swampman right now and you just don't know it? What makes you you? Is it the history, the continuity, the timeline? Or is it the pattern, the structure, the information encoded into your brain? If it's just pattern, then duplication is survival. If it's continuity, then the real you died in the swamp, and this new version is a lie wearing your skin. And here's the creepiest part. Swamp Man isn't a monster. He's not evil. He's not wrong. He's not confused. He's just ... you, or close enough to pass every test. So who decides what counts? Is identity something measurable, or is it a metaphysical ghost we chase but never hold? The paradox tears apart every assumption you have about what it means to be alive, to be conscious, to have a self. Because in a world where replication is possible whether by lightning, machine, or magic, the question of who you are stops being about origin and starts being about continuity. Are you a stream or a snapshot, a process or a product? And if the swamp man cries, are those your tears or his? That's the nightmare and the beauty of the thought experiment. It doesn't give you answers. It just leaves you sitting with the uncomfortable idea that your self might be more fragile, more transferable, and more unknowable than you ever wanted to admit. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you've always been. A storm in the swamp, a flicker of lightning, a copy pretending to be real because it's all you've ever known. Doomsday argument. The doomsday argument doesn't scream at you. It doesn't rely on emotion or disaster scenarios or flashy sci-fi. It sneaks up quietly, sits next to you, and whispers something terrifying in the calmest, most logical tone imaginable. The end is probably closer than you think. It starts with math. That's what makes it so unnerving. It's not a prophecy, it's a probability. The core idea goes like this. If you consider yourself a randomly selected human from the total number of humans who will ever live, then statistically, you're probably somewhere near the middle of that total population, not near the beginning. Let that sink in. It means that if, say, 100 billion people have lived so far, it's unlikely that trillions more will come after you. It's more likely you're somewhere in the middle of the curve. And if that's true, then humanity might be closer to its end than its beginning. The reasoning is disturbingly simple. If you're person number 100 out of 200, that makes sense. If you're person number 100 out of 10 million, that's weirdly early. So the idea goes, if you're alive now, it's unlikely you're among the first 0.0001% of all humans to ever exist. It's more reasonable to assume that the number of people who come after you isn't staggeringly larger than the number who came before. That narrows the future, compresses it, makes the potential end feel not just possible, but statistically expected. You don't need asteroids, climate collapse, or AI uprisings for this one, just numbers. Cold, neutral numbers. And that's where it gets under your skin, because it reframes everything. It's not saying you're doomed. It's saying it would be weird if you weren't. If humanity had millions of years and trillions of people ahead, what are the odds that you now, in this narrow moment of history, would exist so early? Why you? Why now? And if you argue that the population will explode and trillions more will live, then you're saying you're part of an extremely rare early generation. Statistically, that's hard to defend. So either you're weirdly special, or the party's winding down. It's like walking into a theater and seeing most of the movie has already played. You can hope it runs for hours more, but the odds say you probably didn't show up in the first 5 minutes. And that forces you to confront a possibility. Most people try to ignore that civilization isn't permanent, that progress isn't infinite, that humanity is not guaranteed to go on forever. And here's the mind twist. The doomsday argument doesn't care how we end. It doesn't guess how or why. It just says that we probably will, sooner than we like to believe. And it's all based on the unshakable logic of statistical typicality. The idea that you, as a person, are probably not a cosmic outlier. Probably not the first. Probably not the last. Just somewhere in the middle. And if that's true, then the countdown isn't a myth. It's baked into the numbers. This thought experiment doesn't just make you consider the end of humanity. It makes you sit with the unsettling realization that most of us live with an unspoken assumption that the future is endless, that we're on the rise, that time stretches on and on in front of us. But what if it doesn't? What if we're not the ancestors of a galaxy-spanning civilization, but the closing chapter of one short, beautiful, reckless story? The doomsday argument doesn't scream, it whispers. And what it says is this: you might want to pay attention, because the clock might be louder than you think. Brain in a vat. The brain in a vat. Thought experiment strips your reality down to the bone and then asks the one question you never want to hear: how do you know any of this is real? Imagine this: your brain's floating. In a tank of life-sustaining fluid, there's no body, no world, no physical contact. Electrodes run into your tissue, feeding your neurons exactly the right signals to simulate a full sensory experience. You see the world, you hear voices, you feel the wind on your skin, even though you don't have skin. You remember a childhood. You never had conversations that never happened, people who don't exist. It's all fake. Every piece of input is a carefully crafted illusion, generated by a machine or a scientist, or something else entirely. But here's the punch too. The gooch you wouldn't know. You'd be sitting here thinking you're reading words on a screen, sipping tea, listening to rain. All of it delivered to you by streams of electrical data targeted at your brains. Sensory cortex. Your eyes don't exist. Your hands don't exist. The cup never existed. Just electrical impulses. Just your brain. And the terrifying part is, you can't disprove this. Not really. Every test you could try, looking at your hand, checking your surroundings, even pinching yourself, is just part of the simulation. The data can be adjusted, be patched. Everything you experience is filtered through your brain. And if your brain is the thing being manipulated, then your whole world is suspect. That's what makes it worse than a nightmare. A nightmare ends. This doesn't. It goes deeper. It calls into question your sense of self. Because if everything external is fake, what's internal? Your thoughts, your emotions. Are those yours, or are they just programmed responses? You think you're afraid, but is that fear yours? Or is it part of the simulation to keep you from asking questions? Maybe your curiosity right now isn't even yours. Maybe it's a loop, someone else designed to keep your mind engaged, while the rest of your brain is being studied, milked, dissected, replicated. The brain in a vat isn't just science fiction. It's the modern cousin of Descartes' evil demon scenario. It's a reflection of the oldest fear in philosophy: deception, that everything we build, our identity on sensation, memory, experience, might be a lie. Not metaphorically, literally, and it's not about aliens or scientists or AI overlords. The core of the thought experiment is the vulnerability of consciousness itself, that we are completely dependent on the inputs we receive. And if those inputs are controlled, then so are we. So what now? Do you assume the worst? Do you ignore it and keep living? Do you test reality in ways that only deepen the paranoia? That's the trap. The more you question, the less stable everything feels. Every glitch in your vision, every déjà vu, every moment where time seems to stutter becomes suspect. Was that real? Or was the machine lagging? Did someone update your environment mid-thought? And what happens if you realize the truth? What if you become aware that you're in a vat? Do they shut you down, reset you, or do you just go mad trying to process a reality with no body, no world, no end? It's not just solipsism. It's worse. It's isolation at the most fundamental level. Not alone in a room, alone in a universe. Floating, disconnected, fed illusions, for as long as your brain remains viable. And then what? Oblivion. Upload another cycle with different parameters. The brain in a vat forces you to admit something terrifying. There's no solid ground under your feet, no final proof that you're not dreaming, not hallucinating, not trapped in a simulation so perfect it never breaks. And once you've seen that crack, you can't unsee it. Every sensation becomes a question. Every certainty becomes fragile. You're no longer living in the world. You're watching it flicker, like light on the surface of water. You tell yourself, it's probably not true. That you have to live as if reality is real. That you'll go mad otherwise. But deep down, something's changed. Something's shifted. You're a little less sure, a little more alert. And that's the real power of the brain, in a vat, not that it's true, but that it might be. And that one terrifying possibility is enough to shake the entire foundation of your existence. The simulation argument doesn't ask if we live in a fake reality. It tells you it's the most likely option, not a fringe theory, not a sci-fi scenario, just math, logic, and probability, making an airtight case that your life might be nothing more than code. The argument, made famous by philosopher Nick Bostrom, breaks into three possibilities. 1. Humanity never makes it far enough to create hyper-realistic simulations of conscious beings, because we, go extinct first. 2. We do make it that far, but we lose interest in creating simulated realities, maybe because of ethics or boredom or something we haven't thought of. 3. We do make it, and we run simulations done of them simulating ancient humans, random timelines, even fictional scenarios, all with beings inside who think they're real. Now, here's the gut punch. If option 3 is true, then the number of simulated conscious beings would vastly outnumber the number of biological original humans, by orders of magnitude. So if you're a conscious being, the odds say you're one of the simulated ones. Not the original, not the real. Just a character with higher resolution experiences and a backstory written into your neurons. That's the simulation argument. And it doesn't rely on time travel, or magic, or even current technology. It just plays the odds. If we ever create simulated minds that believe they're real, if we run enough of them, then, statistically, you're probably inside one. Now stop. Look around your room. Think about how real it feels. The weight of your body, the light bouncing off your screen, the faint hum of electronics in the background. Everything seems solid, but what if it's just information? What if your room, your body, this thought is all part of a coded environment, designed to be indistinguishable from reality? That's the trick. The simulation wouldn't feel fake. It would feel exactly like this, because it would have to. Otherwise, you'd notice. You'd break the illusion. And the deeper you go, the more disturbing it gets. Because if this is a simulation, then nothing is truly stable. The laws of physics, just consistent rules programmed into the engine. Memory, local storage that can be rewritten. Death may be just a reboot, or deletion, or transfer. Even your sense of self, what you like, what you believe, how you love, could be parameters, configurable variables. The way you reacted to heartbreak might be a scripted outcome. Tied to your character profile, the sense of awe you feel when you look up at the stars might be part of the simulation's emotional package. And then there's the existential layer. If this is a simulation, is someone watching? Are you part of an experiment? A video game, a test, a punishment, a school project in some higher realm of reality? Are your struggles entertainment for someone else? Is your grief meaningful? Or just a statistical outcome? And what happens when the simulation ends? Do you wake up, or do you vanish? Never knowing you were just data. Maybe you're being reset right now and wouldn't know the difference. Maybe the last time you went to sleep, the simulation paused. Maybe the bugs, you notice glitches in memory, weird coincidences, déjà vu aren't in your head. Maybe they're signs the system is unstable, or under maintenance, or testing your awareness. That dream you had last night that felt too real. What if that was an update, a patch, a moment where the simulation lets you slip between layers before pulling you back in? People laugh it off. They say it's just a theory. But then you start seeing it everywhere. The way physics seems oddly elegant, almost like a coding framework. The way time only moves forward. The way reality seems optimized for life, despite the astronomical odds, it starts to feel like world building. Like someone made sure it would be playable. And the more you look, the more you wonder you, the protagonist of your simulation. Or just background code, an NPC in someone else's. Reality, the simulation argument, doesn't need a final answer. It just needs you to admit the possibility exists. And once you admit that, you never see anything quite the same again. You question everything. You hesitate before trusting your senses. You start thinking in systems, in rules, in code. And sometimes, when everything's too quiet, when the street feels a little too empty, when the lighting looks too perfect, you ask yourself, is this real? Or is this the part where the system is idling, waiting for input? And what if you stop playing your role? Do you break the illusion? Do they pull the plug? Or does the simulation adapt, spinning a new narrative to keep you grounded? You don't. No, that's the worst part. You'll never know. And that unknowing is the true prison. Not the wires or the tank or the headset. Just the awareness that you might not be real, the certainty that you'll never be able to prove it either. Kafka's toxin puzzle. Kafka's toxin puzzle doesn't blow your mind with weird physics or alternate universes. It uses something much simpler and way more personal intention. The setup is clean. A wealthy eccentric offers you a deal. If, by the end of today, you can genuinely intend to drink a toxin tomorrow, one that will make you horribly sick for a day, but won't kill you then tonight. He'll give you $1 million. Here's the twist. You get the money just for forming the intention. You don't actually have to drink the toxin. In fact, once the money hits your account, there's no penalty for changing your mind. Drink it or don't it doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that counts is your mental state today. So the question is, can you do it? Can you make yourself sincerely intend to drink the toxin tomorrow, even knowing you'll have zero reason to follow through once the money's in your hands? Your rational mind kicks in immediately. Of course you say you'll drink it. Of course. You go through the motions. But that's not the challenge. The puzzle isn't about faking it's about really meaning it. You have to truly believe you'll go through with it. Convince not just the eccentric, but yourself. And here's where the paradox opens up like a trapdoor. As soon as you realize you'll have no incentive to drink the toxin once the money is yours, your brain resists forming the intention. You can't commit to something your future self has no reason to do. The moment you become aware of that fact, the intention collapses. Even if you want to form it, you can't, not fully, not honestly. It's like trying to hypnotize yourself while knowing you're doing it. The awareness ruins the effect, and suddenly, something that sounds simple, just form an intent, almost impossible, because real intention isn't just words. It's not just saying you'll do something. It's a commitment that lives inside your mind and shapes your future behavior. But here, your future behavior undercuts it. You know tomorrow you will wake up, look at the money in your account and say, "Why the hell would I drink this?" and get violently ill when there's no benefit anymore. And the moment you realize that, today you can't bring yourself to believe in the follow-through, which means no intention, which means no money. The paradox is brutal. It shows that there's a disconnect between what we want to intend and what we can intend. It separates the mechanics of decision-making from the illusion of control. And it raises a deeper question. How much of what we think we decide is actually built on unseen incentives and future conditions? If your future self won't follow through, can you ever truly commit in the present? Is willpower real, or is it just an illusion tied to imagined outcomes? And what does it mean to intend something that you know won't happen? Is that still intention, or is it just mental theater? Here's where it gets weird. What if you could somehow trick yourself into believing you will drink the toxin? You'd get the money. But now tomorrow you wakes up and realizes it was all a setup, that the incentive's gone. Do you still go through with it just to be consistent with your past self's belief? Or do you break the promise to yourself? And if you do, does that retroactively destroy the true intention from the day before? It's like a feedback loop that eats itself. The puzzle isn't about money or poison, it's about the machinery of your mind, about how your present decisions are chained to your future actions, about how deeply your brain is wired to optimize behavior and how hard it is to truly step outside that loop, even when $1 million is on the line. Exposes the fragility of belief, the slipperiness of motivation, and the fact that sincerity isn't something you can fake even to yourself. That's why it haunts philosophers and economists and psychologists, because it reveals something uncomfortable. Your thoughts are not entirely under your control. You can't just will yourself into sincerity. You can't always want what's best in a perfectly rational way. Sometimes you can't even mean what you want to mean. And that's the toxin. Not the one in the bottle, the one in your head. The one that poisons your ability to form clean, untangled intentions when future you is already one step ahead, ready to betray you for comfort or logic. Kafka's toxin puzzle asks a simple question. Can you make yourself believe something you know isn't rational to believe? And the answer most people arrive at, whether they like it or not, is no. Neural lace hypothesis. The neural lace hypothesis is what happens when neuroscience and sci-fi hold hands and whisper. What if we could rewrite what it means to be human? Imagine this. A fine mesh, thinner than a hair, made of nanotechnology, is woven directly into your brain. It doesn't just sit on top, it integrates neuron by neuron, bonding with your mind like thread and fabric. Once it's in there, everything changes. You don't type anymore, you think. You don't scroll or swipe or talk to your devices, they're part of you. Internet access, cloud memory, real-time communication, artificial intelligence direct, piped into your thoughts, no interface, no delay. Just pure, seamless mind-to-machine integration. You become post-human. Sounds amazing, right? Now let's sit in the creepiness for a minute. Because the neural lace doesn't just give you access, it gives access to you. That seamless connection works both ways. Your emotions, your memories, your attention span, they're all data now. Mappable, editable, hackable. Every thought becomes a potential variable. Every instinct becomes measurable input, and once something can be measured, it can be changed. You think you're upgrading your mind, but how long before your mind is just another piece of software being updated, without your consent, or worse, optimized for purposes that don't align with your own? Here's where the paradox hits. The lace promises freedom. No more information barriers. No more isolation. Full control of your cognition. But in giving you that control, it also opens the door to losing it, because now there's a platform. And where there's a platform, there's a power dynamic. There's someone or something behind the scenes with system-level access. Maybe it's a company, maybe it's a government. Maybe it's an AI more intelligent than you'll ever be. And if your thoughts are digital, then who owns them? Who moderates them? Can they be suppressed, altered, deleted, monetized? If you think a dangerous idea, does your lace flag it? If your emotions start trending toward rebellion or fear, do you get nudged back into a more productive mindset? You've given up mental privacy for mental power. And maybe that trade-off isn't as clean as it looks. It also screws with your identity. What happens when your brain has search results before you even finish a thought? When your feelings can be chemically adjusted with a single mental command? When you can delete a traumatic memory like trashing a file, you become something else, part biology, part machine. No clear line where one ends and the other begins. And once that line disappears, so does the concept of a stable self. Are you still you if your preferences are optimized in the background? If your beliefs shift because your neural interface was given an update patch, what's left of the original you when your emotions, decisions, and personality are sculpted in real time by algorithms smarter than anything that ever evolved naturally? Even scarier, what, if you like it? What if the lace makes you better, happier, more efficient, more empathetic? What if you willingly give up your autonomy because the version of you that's enhanced feels more you than you ever did before? Is that liberation or erasure? If you're being improved, but the you doing the improving isn't really you, does it still count? Or have you become a well-polished stranger who looks back at the raw, unaugmented version of yourself with pity or, worse, disgust? This thought experiment doesn't warn against technology, just exposes what it demands in return. You get brilliance, but at the cost of mystery. You get efficiency, but lose friction. You gain access, but risk ownership. It's a trade, not good or bad, just irreversible. Once you lace your brain, there's no going back. Your mind becomes a network node. Your reality becomes adjustable. Your sense of real becomes debuggable. And the version of you that signs up for it might not be the one that walks out the other side. Neural lace is the promise of mental transcendence wrapped in a slow-burning horror story. The kind where the scariest part isn't losing control, it's realizing you gave it away with a smile. Birdie and Donkey is stuck. Imagine a donkey standing perfectly equidistant between two identical piles of hay. Same size, same smell, same appeal. It's hungry and wants to eat, but it can't decide. Every time it leans left, the right pile looks just as good. Every time it leans right, the left seems like the smarter choice. It's not indecisive, it's perfectly rational. And that's the problem. In a scenario with no distinguishable difference between two options, a perfectly logical mind can't make a choice. So the donkey starves, not because it lacks food, but because it can't justify choosing one over the other. That's the paradox, and you're the donkey more often than you realize. Think of the decisions you stall on to job offers with identical perks. Two people you could date, each with a different but equally compelling personality. Two cities to live in, both offering opportunity and adventure. You spiral, you overthink, you list pros and cons until they cancel each other out. Then you freeze. You're not lazy, you're not indecisive, you're too rational. You've over-optimized yourself into paralysis. In a world where we're taught to always make the best choice, Birdie and Donkey shows the danger of perfect logic. It doesn't know how to break a tie, and sometimes ties are inevitable. Life isn't always weighted. The real kicker is that the donkey doesn't need to pick the better option. It just needs to pick either. Pile would save it. but its need to be correct, its refusal to choose arbitrarily, is what kills it. That's where the thought experiment hits home. How many opportunities have you missed because you waited for clarity that never came? How many paths did you fail to walk because you kept standing at the fork, waiting for a sign? The paradox doesn't just mock the donkey, shines a spotlight on how flawed our idea of rationality can be. We think the smartest decision is always the one with the most logic behind it. But sometimes the smartest thing is to decide even if it's random. Flip a coin, close your eyes, and point. Let go of the need for certainty, because perfect logic doesn't always lead to action, and without action, you stall, you rot, you become a creature of hesitation, and you don't need to be. Sometimes life just needs movement. The freedom to act without needing a bulletproof reason, and the courage to trust that either pile of hay will be enough, that whichever road you pick will teach you something, that it's better to eat than to die thinking about which meal is slightly better. Birdie and Donkey isn't just a philosophical joke, it's a warning about the trap of perfection, about the cost of overanalysis, about how indecision can masquerade as intelligence until it chokes the life out of you. So next time you find yourself stuck between two good options, remember the donkey. Start walking. Let experience make the difference that logic can't. Plank of Carnetta's, the plank of Carnetta's drops you into a brutal moral dilemma, one where survival claws at the edges of justice. Picture this: two shipwreck survivors are in the ocean, clinging to life. One of them reaches the plank first, the other swims up, desperate. But instead of sharing, the first person pushes them away, maybe even kills them. Not out of hatred, not out of rage, just to survive. Now here's the question: is that person guilty of murder? Or were they just defending their life the only way they could? That's the paradox. Survival versus morality. In a situation with no good options, where the rules break down and instincts take over, can we still hold people to the same standards we use in civilization? And if we can't, what does that say about morality itself? Is it situational? Is it suspended in moments of crisis? Or is it absolute even when following it means dying? The plank of Carnetta's doesn't give easy answers. It forces you to live in the tension. Because the idea of punishing someone for doing what any of us might do when faced with death feels wrong. But so does letting someone kill another person and walk away without consequence. The law wants consistency. Reality doesn't care. In the courtroom, we look at intent, circumstance, alternatives, just desperation and the instinct to survive. And that raises a deeper question: what is morality when all structure collapses? If ethics only work when there's room to choose safely, are they truly moral, or just luxuries of comfort? The paradox makes you rethink the line between self-defense and selfishness, between murder and instinct, between crime and tragedy. And it pushes you to ask, what would you do? Not what should be done, not what you hope you'd do, but what your body, panicking in cold water, would actually do. Would you offer the plank and risk dying together? Would you try to reason with someone who's gasping for air and sees you as the only thing standing between them and death? Would you push? Would you kill? And if you did, could you live with it? Could you sit in a courtroom and say, I did what I had to do, knowing full well someone died because you chose yourself? That's what makes this paradox stick. It reveals the clash between survival and justice, between our primal selves and our civilized ideals. Most people believe in justice until they're drowning. Most people claim to be moral until survival is on the line. But the ocean doesn't care about ethics, and neither does your biology. That's the disturbing part, knowing you might make the same choice and still not be sure if it was right. It haunts the spaces between legal guilt and moral guilt, because maybe the law lets you go, but your conscience doesn't. Or maybe you convince yourself it was necessary, but others see a killer. There's no clean resolution. That's why the plank of Carnetta's has lasted for centuries, because it isn't just about one hypothetical moment. It's about the limits of morality. When reality gets cruel, it's about the terrifying fact that sometimes ethics don't save you, and sometimes, to save yourself, you have to break them. Cheshire Cat Experiment. The Cheshire Cat Experiment doesn't ask you to imagine fairy tales. It drags them into quantum physics and dares you to explain what just happened. It's named after the grinning cat in Alice in Wonderland, the one that disappears but leaves its smile floating in midair. Now, swap the cat for a particle. In this thought experiment based on real quantum mechanics, the cat is a neutron. The body of the neutron goes one way. Its magnetic momenta, part that interacts with magnetic fields, goes another. They've been separated. Literally, it's like watching a smile without a mouth, an identity without a location, a trait without the object that's supposed to carry it. Think about that for a second. Charge, spin, you assume the object and its properties are inseparable. A red apple has redness. A moving ball has momentum. Moment travels down another, as if the particles split into the thing and its characteristics. It's not just metaphor, it's what the math and the measurements say is happening. There's no glitch, no trick. The particle and its properties are no longer in the same place. This isn't sci-fi, this is peer-reviewed quantum physics. Welcome to madness. Now stretch that concept. If a property can be separated from its particle, what else can be? Can reality fragment into functionally independent layers? And how do you define something when its parts are no longer co-located? Here, but the electron itself is somewhere else. What are we even observing? Are we seeing the particle or the echo of its qualities? It shatters the very idea of what an object is. Traditionally, an object is a bundle of properties. But if those properties can go solo, then what holds the object together? The Cheshire Cat experiment tears at the seams of ontology. More unsettlingly, it suggests that reality isn't as tightly packed as we thought, that traits can roam, that behavior doesn't need a body. In quantum terms, it's like your smile walking into a room a few seconds before your face, or your personality showing up before your physical presence. It questions how we observe, how we measure, and whether we're seeing things or just outcomes. In a world where particles can have location and identity split apart, maybe our sense of self is built on the illusion of cohesion. Maybe you aren't one thing, but a tightly woven cluster of properties dancing close enough to look whole. And if those threads ever untangle, if your emotions, memories, and thoughts start to separate, do you stop being you? Or is that just what you've always been, a quantum smile floating without a cat? It forces you to see identity not as solid, but as stitched. Is a structure of properties coalescing for long enough to call itself a person, then drifting, then gone. That's the Cheshire Cat, not a trick, not a metaphor, a very real peek into how fragmented reality can become when you zoom in far enough. A smile, still there, even after the cat has vanished. Maureen absurdity. Maureen absurdity hits you like a quiet contradiction, not a loud, obvious one, but the kind that creeps up on your logic, undermines it, and makes you feel like you're standing on quicksand while trying to argue from solid ground. Here's how it works. But I don't believe it's raining. That's the essence of a Maureen statement, saying something that may be true, but becomes absurd the moment you say it out loud. Why? Because your words contradict your position. The statement could, in theory, be factual: it is raining, and maybe you really don't believe it. But the moment you acknowledge that it's raining, it cancels out your disbelief. If you know it's raining, then you believe it's raining. Otherwise, you don't actually know. It's a paradox of self, like claiming, I know this statement is false, or I'm dead right now, or even, I exist, but I don't believe I do. These aren't lies, they're fractures in meaning. They show how truth and belief twist around each other, until your mouth becomes the exit wound of a contradiction. G.E. Moore, the philosopher who this concept is named after, used it to push back against skepticism. The classic example, I know this is a hand. That sounds absurd, right? But in response to someone questioning whether you can really know anything at all, Moore doubled down. Here is one hand, here is another. Therefore, at least two external objects exist. Therefore, an external world exists. It's bold, it's simple, but it reveals something darker. We often believe things we can't prove, and we try to prove things we don't fully believe. And when the two don't match, when knowledge and belief fall out of sync, you get absurdity, the kind that doesn't break logic, but exposes its blind spots. Let's push it further. Say you're a scientist, and you've spent your whole life studying the brain. You understand every neuron, every signal, every neurotransmitter. You say the mind is just the brain. But then your dog dies, and you grieve, and you whisper, I feel like I've lost a piece of my soul. Now you're in Maureen territory. You intellectually believe the mind is biological, but emotionally, you behave as if something deeper exists. Two truths. Their life to activism while secretly thinking it's probably too late. We're doomed. Yet they still fight, still raise awareness, still beg people to change. That's a marine absurdity too, saying one thing, believing another. Not because you're dishonest, but because you're human and humans aren't consistent. We split ourselves between what we know and what we admit, between what we argue and what we trust. It's not always hypocrisy. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes we need marine absurdities to function. You tell yourself, I'll be okay, even if you don't believe it. You say love is real, even after being broken. You whisper, everything happens for a reason, while knowing full well it probably doesn't. These aren't lies, they're rituals. When you point them out, when you drag the absurdity into the light, tit starts to unravel. That comforting lie, and that's the danger of marine absurdity. It shows you how fragile your own convictions are when pressed too hard. It reminds you that belief is not just intellectual lights, behavioral, emotional, situational. And that mismatch between knowing and believing, between logic and language, between speech and stance, that's where the cracks form. The more you examine them, the more you see how often your life rests on contradictions you never noticed. You believe in free will, but you also believe in cause and effect. You trust science, but fear death. You crave meaning while insisting the universe has none. You say everything will be okay while knowing there's no reason it should be. Welcome to the loop. It just lays bare the chaos you live with and the strange, fragile dance between what you know and what you pretend to. Temporal reversal. Temporal reversal doesn't just play with time, it flips your entire sense of causality inside out and forces you to question whether you've ever really understood what it means for something to happen. Used to time flowing in one direction, past to present to future. You're born, you grow up, you die. You light a match. The flame burns, the match turns to ash. Events unfold, cause leads to effect. It feels so obvious, so intuitive, that we forget it's an assumption. Physics doesn't see time the same way we do. At the most fundamental level, especially in quantum mechanics and certain formulations of thermodynamics, the laws are time-symmetric, meaning they work just as well forwards as they do backwards. Imagine watching a film of two particles colliding. Play it forward, then reverse it. The equations don't care. They'll still hold. There's no preference. The laws don't say this is the direction of time. That's something we impose. So here's the mind breaker. If the rules of the universe don't care about time's direction, why do we experience it in one? What if it's not about time at all, but entropy disorder, increasing, maybe what we call the arrow of time, is really just the direction in which disorder grows? Ice melts, buildings crumble, people age. But if we could reverse entropy, would we also reverse time? Would people undie? Would smoke return to the cigarette? Would you remember tomorrow instead of yesterday? And now it gets wild, because some physicists think particles might actually respond to future conditions. Like something that will happen could influence what's happening now. It's called retrocausality. The idea that the future can reach back and tweak the past, it's not magic. It's baked into some interpretations of quantum mechanics. The famous delayed choice experiment, for example, suggests that how you choose to measure a particle in the present can retroactively determine its past state. In other words, you can affect what already happened, not by changing memory, by changing the reality that produced the memory. That's temporal reversal, a future cause generating a past effect. Now think about what that does to your sense of agency. What if your choices aren't just influenced by the past, but also shaped by outcomes that haven't occurred yet? What if that strange feeling you had before making a big decision, what we call intuition, was your brain responding to information echoing backwards through time? What if déjà vu is just your mind catching the aftershock of a moment you haven't reached yet? These aren't just poetic ideas. They're grounded in very real questions about how time functions at the quantum level. And the deeper you go, the more it starts to feel like time isn't a river, but a loop, a field, a strange dimension where cause and effect are tangled, not linear. Think about fate. If the future can influence the present, does that mean everything is predetermined? Or is it even worser, we constantly editing the past without realizing it? each version of ourselves rewriting the story based on a future we haven't lived yet. And if that's true, how can you trust your memories? How can you even define a moment when every now is connected to a chain of influences in both directions? The horror here isn't just metaphysical, it's personal, because you start to wonder if your regrets were always destined, if your victories were echoes of something yet to come, if your entire identity is shaped not just by what's behind you, but by things that haven't even happened yet. Time, once a comforting march, now becomes a not every step forward, tugging on threads behind you. The past, not as fixed history, but as a living map constantly shifting under your feet. The future, not as unknown territory, but as an active force shaping your present in ways you can't detect. So what are you? A traveler through time? Or a puppet suspended between two infinities, moved by waves that flow both forward and back? Temporal reversal doesn't give you an answer. It just yanks away the illusion of stability and shows you the terrifying possibility that time isn't something you walk through, but something that walks through you. Swampman walks out of lightning and dares you to say he isn't real. Imagine this, you're walking through a swamp. A freak lightning strike hits you, vaporizes your body on the spot. Gone. At that exact moment, another bolt hits a nearby patch of swamp and, by impossible chance, rearranges the atoms there into a perfect copy of you. Same height, same DNA, same memories, same laugh, same guilt. This creature stands up, walks out of the swamp, calls your friends, hugs your partner, logs into your accounts, and keeps living your life like nothing happened. That's Swapman. He's you, but not you, because he wasn't born. He wasn't shaped by your childhood. He didn't actually go through any of the experiences that formed you. He just appeared, fully formed, functionally identical. So here's the paradox. Is Swampman you? If not, why not? He thinks he's you. He remembers your life. He feels love, fear, hunger. He behaves the same. He's a perfect copy at the atomic level. But if you say no, he's not me, then what are you claiming? That your identity isn't about what you are now, but how you got here. That the path matters more than the state. If that's true, then memories don't make you, because his memories are indistinguishable from yours. They just didn't happen. Which means maybe memory itself isn't proof of experience. Maybe it's just data. Which means your own memories could, in theory, be falsened. You'd never... No, maybe you're someone else's Swampman. Maybe you were created 5 minutes ago, preloaded with a lifetime of memories. You'd never notice. You'd argue you're real, but so would he. That's what makes it unsettling. Swampman behaves like a person, feels like a person, loves like a person. But you hesitate to call him real because he skipped the becoming part. He's just there. No story, no arc, no struggle. But if that makes him fake, then what does that say about your story? Are you only real because your atoms happen to arrange slowly over decades? Is there any essential you? Or are you just a pattern one that could be copied, rebooted, printed out in a lab, and would still walk around insisting, I'm me? If Swampman isn't you, is he someone new? A stranger with your face and feelings? What would you tell your family? That their husband or wife or child is gone, though the person in front of them talks the same, cries the same, remembers the same things. Would you tell them to grieve someone who looks alive? Or do they just move on with Swampman and pretend nothing changed? And if they can do that, then maybe identity isn't as sacred as we think. Maybe it's more replaceable than we're willing to admit. Maybe we're not people, we're patterns. Streams of memory and behavior held together in a bag of meat for a little while. And maybe what scares us most isn't that Swampman exists, it's that he works, that he goes on, that he laughs at the same jokes and misses the same people, that there's no test for authenticity. No way to prove your experience is more valid than his. Because once you start asking that question, the whole concept of a stable self starts to shake. You aren't a continuous being, you're just a current. And if someone else can step into the current and it keeps flowing, maybe the current is all that mattered. Swampman haunts that idea. The possibility that your soul, your essence, your one-of-a-kind self is just an illusion riding on top of structure. And if the structure can be copied, then maybe the you that you hold sacred isn't. Brain in a vat, Brain in a vat is the kind of thought experiment that doesn't just make you question the world, it makes you question whether there's even a you doing the questioning. Strip everything back. Imagine your body never existed, connected to a supercomputer that feeds it electrical signals perfectly designed to mimic reality. The sky, fake. The warmth of the sun on your skin, fabricated. Every word you've ever read, every meal you've ever tasted, every face you've ever loved, none of it real. Just impulses sent to a lump of tissue in a jar. That's you. Now, here's the kicker: you'd never know. If the simulation is perfect, then every test you run to determine whether your world is real gets intercepted and answered by the system. You look in a mirror, and it shows your face. You feel pain, and it's consistent. You try to break the illusion, but the illusion updates in real time to prevent it. There's no crack in the wall, no sign of the machine. You are absolutely convinced that you're living in a real world because your brain is receiving everything it needs to believe that's true, but you're not. You're a brain in a vat. The problem is, this isn't just science fiction. It's philosophy's version of pulling the rug out from under reality. Because if this scenario is possible, then how do you know it isn't happening right now? If your senses can be tricked, and they can, and if all your knowledge comes from those senses, then how can you trust anything at all? Maybe you're not even a brain. Maybe you don't exist. Maybe what you call you is just a pattern of reactions being simulated for reasons beyond your understanding. You've been taught to believe in an external world. You walk through it, you talk to people, you feel time pass. But all of that happens inside your brain, inside your mind. And if that mind is just a circuit receiving inputs, then the world you know is nothing but noise. Now pause. Sit with that. Every relationship, every ambition, every moment of awe or grief or triumph, what if all of it is synthetic? Not because someone is trying to deceive you, but because you've never existed outside the simulation. There's no exit, no unplugging. You are the program. But here's where it folds in on itself. How is this different from your current life? You already experience the world indirectly. Light hits your eyes, vibrations reach your ears, molecules land on your tongue. By your brain, you've always been in a vat. The only difference is whether the vat is inside a skull or not. And that's the terrifying part. There's no test to escape this thought. Any proof you demand could be part of the illusion. Any reality check can be faked, and so you're left in a loop. Either trust your experience or admit that everything might be a lie, including the self that's questioning it. It doesn't stop at doubt. It erodes your confidence in language, logic, even philosophy itself. Because if your thoughts are generated by a simulation, then your deepest insights might be artificial too. Your sense of meaning might be programmed. Your ethics, your art, your love just code. But then, flip it again. Does that make it meaningless? If simulated love feels like love, is it fake? If your friendships happen in a virtual world, but they still comfort you, are they less real? If you feel joy, does it matter where it came from? Maybe what this thought experiment really reveals is that experience, not reality, is what we live for. That truth might be unknowable, but meaning doesn't have to be. Brain in a vat forces you to abandon the fantasy of certainty. It doesn't prove that you're trapped. It proves that you'd never know if you were. And somehow, despite that, you still care. You still want to feel something true. The utility monster. The utility monster doesn't kill with claws or teeth that wrecks morality with math. Picture a being who experiences happiness, not just more intensely than you, but exponentially more. Like if you eat a piece of cake and feel a 5 out of 10 on the joy scale. The utility monster eats that same cake and feels a 5,000, not metaphorically, pleasure into utility at a massively higher rate than any other human or creature. So now the question, if your goal is to maximize total happiness in the world, then that's the foundation of utilitarian ethics. Shouldn't you give everything to the utility monster? All the food, all the medicine, all the resources? Because no matter what you give it, it generates more happiness per unit than anyone else possibly could. Your suffering, worth it. Your discomfort, justified. Because the happiness produced outweighs the pain inflicted. That's what the math says, and that's what makes it terrifying. Because it reveals a dark flaw in utilitarianism. That moral rightness is just about maximizing happiness or minimizing pain. In theory, That's clean. In practice, it becomes a horror show. The utility monster turns ethics into a kind of tyranny, one where the most valuable creature by some arbitrary scale of pleasure justifies infinite sacrifice from everyone else. And that's not just uncomfortable, it's inhumane. But here's the kicker. You already live in a world where versions of the utility monster exist. Think of billionaires who argue they deserve more because they produce more value. Or companies that justify paying one executive 1,000 times more than a worker because of impact. The structure might be less obvious, but the logic is the same. Those who generate more utility, whether money, productivity, innovation, etc., deserve disproportionate rewards. The more they're worth, the more they get, and the more others are expected to give up to feed them. It's not about monsters. It's about models of value. And once you accept that maximizing happiness is the only goal, you've opened the door to a world where the individual doesn't matter, only their output does. You might think, well, that's easy, just cap the monster's rewards, create limits. But now you're modifying utilitarianism. You're no longer maximizing happiness or introducing fairness, dignity, equality, things that don't always align with pure math. And that's the real paradox. The utility monster exposes how easily moral systems that seem compassionate can lead to cruelty, how something designed to reduce suffering can end up justifying exploitation. Because math doesn't care about people, it cares about totals. It turns morality into an equation. And if someone out there scores 10,000 happiness points for every dollar, and you only score 1, then according to the system, your loss is nothing. You're expendable. It's chilling, but it's also clarifying, because it forces you to confront what kind of morality you really believe in. Are you okay with sacrifice for the greater good? How much? Who's good? At what cost? Would you let 1 million people suffer just so one monster can be ecstatic? What if that monster is a city, a country, a corporation, a god? And what if you are the monster? If you feel more, achieve more, think more, do, others owe you their comfort. That's the uncomfortable reversal. The utility monster isn't just a critique of utilitarianism. It's a mirror. It shows how easy it is to slip into justifying injustice when you're chasing the abstract dream of more and more happiness, more good, more output. But without boundaries, more turns monstrous. And ethics becomes math without mercy. Eternal return. Eternal return doesn't ask you to believe in fate. It asks you to believe in repetition. Perfect, infinite repetition. Imagine this. Every moment of your life, from birth to death, happens over and over again. Not once, not a few times, but endlessly. The exact same choices, the same mistakes, the same laughter, pain, boredom, breakthroughs, betrayals, and regrets. You don't know it's repeating. You live each life like it's the first, but it's not. It's just one cycle in a loop that never ends. That's eternal return. And here's the part that cracks your worldview. If this were true, if you were trapped in a forever rerun of your existence, would you change anything? Not to break the cycle, you can't, but to live it in a way that you could stand repeating it again and again and again. That's the challenge Nietzsche posed when he first introduced the idea not as a physical reality, but as a test of how you're living. He wasn't trying to scare you. He was trying to ask, are you living a life you could say yes to, even if you had to live it forever? Most people aren't. Most people sleepwalk through their days, chasing comfort, avoiding pain, numbing out the middle. But eternal return forces you to stare straight at your own patterns. It asks you to imagine being stuck in your own habits, your own decisions, your own compromises, not once, but eternally. No do-overs, no redemption arcs. Just the same life, over and over. It's not about heaven or hell. It's about what you make of the only life you have. And the terror of it isn't supernatural, it's existential, because suddenly every small decision matters. That conversation you avoided, that apology you never made, that lie you told to protect your ego. You're not just living with the consequences once, you're living with them forever. But here's the deeper twist. Maybe you already are. Maybe you're already in the loop. Maybe déjà vu is a glitch, not in the matrix, but in your memory of past cycles. Maybe your instincts, your gut feelings, are echoes of lifetimes lived before, warning you or nudging you based on outcomes you don't. Remember, maybe you avoid certain people, certain roads, certain risks, because deep down, you've seen how it ends. You just forgot. The eternal return doesn't require a supernatural mechanism. Physics entertains cyclical universes, repeating big bangs, closed time-like curves, but even without the science, the thought alone is enough to rearrange your priorities. Because now, the question becomes urgent. If you had to live this day 1,000 more times, would you do anything differently? Would you say the thing you're scared to say? Would you stop wasting time on resentment, pettiness, comparison? Would you stop waiting for the right moment and start living as if this is the moment? Because it will be the only one you ever get, over and over again. Eternal return doesn't punish, it challenges. It dares you to create a life so full, so honest, so aligned with what matters, that even eternal repetition wouldn't diminish it. It strips away the illusion that you'll eventually get around to what matters, that someday you'll fix it. Apologize. Try harder. Take the leap. Love fully. Instead, it says, this is it, forever. Are you proud of it? Or does that thought terrify you? And if it terrifies you, what are you waiting for? Doomsday argument. The doomsday argument doesn't use fire, floods, or nuclear war to end the world. It uses probability, just math, cold, indifferent. Math that doesn't care about hope or optimism. The setup is deceptively simple. Imagine you're a human being randomly born somewhere in the full span of human history, from the first person ever to the very last. You have no reason to believe you're special. No reason to think you're among the earliest or the last. So statistically, you're probably born somewhere in the middle. That's the key idea. And when you plug in the numbers, it gets disturbing fast. Let's say very generously that 100 billion people have ever lived. You're one of them. You. Assume, naively, that humanity has a long future ahead. Millions of years, trillions of future people. But if that's true, then you're one of the very first way up front in the line of billions. An extreme statistical outlier. That's unlikely, uncomfortably unlikely. In fact, much more likely is that you're roughly in the middle of humanity's timeline, which means there won't be trillions of future people. There might only be a few billion more, which means the end is closer than we want to admit. That's the doomsday argument. It's not predicting a specific disaster. It's saying that just by existing now and knowing roughly how many have existed before you, you can make a disturbingly solid guess about how many might come after you. And the number isn't huge. It's finite, maybe shockingly small. It reframes our entire place in history. We like to believe we're at the beginning of something massive, a galactic civilization, an endless future. But the odds don't lean that way. The odds say we're probably not that special. We're probably typical. And if we're typical, then the human story might already be more than halfway over. It's uncomfortable because it's not emotional. It's not driven by pessimism or fear. It's pure statistical reasoning. You exist. You're somewhere. In the human timeline, odds are you're not at the very beginning or very end. That leaves only one possibility. There's not much road left. Now, you might push back. What if population explodes? What if we colonize planets and spread out across the galaxy? What if future generations number in the trillions? Sure, those are possibilities. But the more future people you imagine, the more absurd your position in the timeline becomes. You end up being in the first 0.0001% of all humans ever. That's not impossible, but it's suspicious. Like winning a lottery you didn't even enter, which means either we're weirdly lucky or there aren't many tickets left. The doomsday argument doesn't want to be right, but it doesn't care if it is. It just points to the unspoken assumptions we carry that we're early. We'll be fine, that the future is huge. And it says, maybe not. Maybe we're closer to the end than the beginning. Maybe we're already living in history's final chapters. The emotional impact is heavy. You look at your life differently when you imagine it as part of humanity's final act. The silly fights, the wasted time, the things you put off, suddenly they feel sharper, more urgent, more real, because if this really is near the end of, the human experiment is nearly over then. Every moment matters more, not less. The doomsday argument doesn't offer comfort. It offers clarity, a forced look at the numbers, a reminder that eternity isn't guaranteed and that the future you, Imagine might not be waiting after all. In Mary's room isn't a physical space. It's a trap built out of knowledge. Here's how it works. Mary is a scientist, a brilliant one. She lives in a completely black and white room. Every book she reads, every screen she looks at, every diagram, lecture, or experiment is in grayscale. But despite that, she's an expert in the science of color. She knows every wavelength, every neural pattern, every physiological and psychological fact about how humans see color. She understands exactly what happens in your brain when you look at something red. She can model the entire process. She knows it better than anyone, but she's never seen red. She's never seen blue or yellow or green, just gray. Now the question, when Mary finally leaves her black and white room and sees a red apple for the first time, does she learn something new? That's the paradox. If she learns something, if she says, "Ah, so that's what red looks like," then clearly there's more to knowledge than just facts. There's experience. And that kind of knowledge, called qualia, isn't something you can read in a book. It has to be felt. But if you believe that the brain is just a machine and all experiences can be reduced to data, then Mary shouldn't learn anything new. She already knew all the facts. Seeing red should just be another confirmed theory. But it isn't, not emotionally, not intuitively. Something hits when she sees it, something facts alone couldn't provide. That's where the paradox lives. It pulls at the idea that consciousness isn't just computation, that knowing how something works isn't the same as living through it. You can explain love scientifically, hormones, neural pathways, evolutionary triggers, but that doesn't mean you've felt love. You can break down grief into brain chemicals, but that doesn't mean you understand what it's like to lose someone. Mary's room is a challenge to materialism, the belief that everything, including the mind, is physical. Because if experience can't be captured by physical facts, then maybe consciousness is something more, or something different. Maybe subjective experience, what it feels like to be you, can't be bottled, printed, or simulated, and that makes it slippery. Maybe consciousness is a ghost in the data, a property that emerges when the system gets complex enough but refuses to be broken back into pieces. Mary's room also forces you to consider how limited your own knowledge is, how many things you think you know because you've read them, studied them, named them, but you've never felt them. You can talk about pain, but until it's yours, you're still in the room. You can debate morality, but until you've been faced with a real choice that hurts, you're still in the room. You can intellectualize love, joy, jealousy, fear, but until you've lived them, they're just abstract shapes behind glass. The real world is color. You just don't see it until you walk outside. And sometimes we forget we're still in Mary's room. We live surrounded by screens, theories, data, labels. We consume experiences secondhand. We substitute definitions for emotions. But the truth is, stepping out of the room changes you. Seeing the red apple, feeling the thing itself, expands you in a way no textbook ever could. That's not a dismissal of knowledge. It's a reminder that knowledge has layers. The knowing of the mind, the knowing of the body, the knowing of the heart. And sometimes, you don't know what you don't know until the moment hits your senses and you feel yourself become something more than the person you were the second before. That's the paradox. Mary had all the facts, but she didn't have the experience. And when she finally did, everything changed. The Sleeping Beauty paradox starts off like a fairy tale, but ends like a logic trap. Here's how it works. Sleeping Beauty agrees to take part in a strange experiment. On Sunday night, she's put to sleep. A fair coin is flipped. If it lands heads, she's woken up on Monday, interviewed, then put back to sleep, but she never wakes again after that. If the coin lands tails, she's woken up on Monday, interviewed, then given a drug that erases her memory. On Tuesday, she's woken again, interviewed once more, and then the experiment ends. In both cases, she doesn't know what day it is when she wakes up. Her memory is wiped after each awakening. She always wakes up the same way, with no memory of any prior waking. Now the question, when she wakes up and is asked, what is the probability that the coin landed heads? What should she say? Here's where the paradox kicks in. One camp called them the halfers, says the answer is 1/2. After all, the coin was flipped once, and nothing she learns when waking up gives her new information. The odds were 50/50ths then, and they remain 50/50ths now. But the other camp, the thirders, argues that the correct answer is 1/3. Why? Because if the coin lands heads, there's only one awakening, Monday. If it lands tails, there are two awakenings, Monday and Tuesday. That means out of 3 possible wake-ups, heads Monday, tails Tuesday, only one corresponds. 2 heads. So when Sleeping Beauty wakes up and doesn't know what day it is, the odds of her being in the heads scenario is 1 in 3. That's the paradox. 2 logical arguments, 2 clear systems of reasoning, 2 different answers, and neither feels obviously wrong. One says, the coin is fair, and nothing has changed. The other says, you're more likely to be in a tails world because tails creates more wake-ups, and that second part stings. It means that just by waking up, just by existing, you've tilted the odds. That's unsettling, because it suggests your presence, your awareness, your consciousness might update probabilities. That's not how we're taught to think about facts. But in this case, your experience, the fact that your actually contains information. Without new data, just the fact of waking affects what's rational to believe. The implications are huge. Imagine applying this to other forms of uncertainty, like living in a multiverse where different outcomes spawn different timelines, or making decisions under amnesia, not knowing if you've made the choice before. Sleeping Beauty becomes a metaphor for any scenario where memory, identity, and probability twist around each other. You start asking deeper questions. How do you know what day it is? How do you know who you are? Can your current awareness be trusted to reflect objective truth? Or is it just a slice of a larger experiment you'll never understand? And even worse, what if your entire sense of time is just a loop of forgotten awakenings, each one indistinguishable from the last? Life isn't linear at all. Maybe it's a series of interviews, each one following a flip you'll never see. Cheshire Cat experiment. The Cheshire Cat experiment isn't just a physics trick, it's a direct challenge to your belief in the connection between objects and their properties. Here's the basic setup. In quantum mechanics, particles don't have fixed states until you measure them. That's weird enough. But the Cheshire Cat takes it further. It shows that you can, under certain experimental conditions, separate a particle from one of its physical properties, like pulling the grin off the cat in Alice in Wonderland and having the smile float in the air after the cat has vanished. That's where the name comes from. In one version of the experiment, a neutral particle is sent through an interferometer, a device that splits and later recombines particle paths. Scientists measured the position of the neutron going one way and its magnetic moment, a property related to spin or orientation, going the other way. The results suggested something wild. The particle traveled down one path, while its property took the other. In other words, the neutron went left. Its spin went right. That shouldn't be possible. In classical physics, an object has properties. A ball has mass. A car has speed. A person has thoughts. You don't expect to find someone's anger floating in one room while they're sitting in another, but the Cheshire Cat says that, at the quantum level, particles and properties aren't glued together the way we assume. They can, under the right conditions, detach, which means the relationship between a thing and what it has is more complicated than it seems. You start to ask strange questions. Can you steal a property without stealing the object? Can you store qualities separately from things? Can you be somewhere while your traits are somewhere else? That's not just quantum trickery, it opens up philosophical rabbit holes. What if identity is more modular than we think? What if your courage, your memories, your fears, your desires could be separated from your body like magnetic spin from a neutron? Could someone wear your sense of humor? Could you upload your empathy while leaving your impatience behind? It sounds like science fiction, but the experiment isn't fiction. It's real, it's testable, it's been done. The particle and the property do separate paths, and that forces us to rethink what it means to be something. Maybe properties aren't attached by necessity. Maybe what makes you you isn't fixed, but entangled fluid capable of moving in different directions depending on context. Measurement, environment. The Cheshire Cat experiment shows us that the universe is far stranger than metaphors can explain, because it's not just about neutrons, it's about assumptions, the ones we didn't know we were making. Like the idea that a thing and what it does are inseparable, or that you can't measure something's effect while it's somewhere else entirely. But in this world, the quantum world grins don't need cats. Shadows move without bodies. And nothing stays in one piece unless you force it to. The unsettling truth is that we may all be a little like that cat walking through life, leaving bits of ourselves behind, not always knowing where they ended up. Plank of Carneades. The plank of Carneades is one of those paradoxes that hits you where morality and survival collide. It doesn't ask what's right in theory, it asks what you'd actually do when your life is on the line, and what that choice says about justice. The setup is deceptively simple. Two sailors are shipwrecked in a storm and thrown into the sea. They're far from land, the water's cold, and there's only one plank that can support a single person. One sailor swims to the plank and climbs on. The other clings to it, but there's not enough space. If both hang on, they'll sink and die. But if one stays and the other doesn't, one will survive. Now, imagine the sailor already on the plank kicks the other off to save himself. The second sailor drowns. The first one is rescued and survives. Here's the question. Is that sailor a murderer or just someone trying to live? This isn't a question about rules. It's a question about what justice really means when two rights clash. Both sailors have the right to survive. Both are equals, but the situation only allows one to live. That's where the paradox begins. The original philosopher Carneades brought this scenario up in a legal context. That sailor is later brought to court should he be punished. After all, he killed another man. But he didn't do it out of hatred or greed or revenge. He did it to survive. He didn't choose the storm. He didn't choose the plank. But he did make a choice and someone died because of it. That's the core of the paradox. In normal life, morality is clean. Don't kill, don't steal, help others. But in situations like this, rules collide. There's no path where everyone lives. No option where you can follow every principle at once. And that's what makes it so uncomfortable. There is no good choice, only one that lets someone live and someone else die. You can dress it up with legal terms, but the moral weight is still there. And here's the real twist. If you were the one in the water, what would you expect? Would you plead? Would you try to yank the other off the plank? Would you take your chances and let go? We like to think of ourselves as moral people, but morality in a vacuum is easy. You're polite, you don't hurt people, you recycle. But when you're drowning and someone else is standing between you and the only chance to live, the calculation changes. It becomes raw, primal, and then, later if you survive, you have to live with the choice, or justify it, or suppress it. Now, let's pull this out of the ocean and into your real life. The plank of Carneades isn't just about shipwrecks. It's about competition, scarcity, desperation. Imagine a job interview where there's only one position. Two people equally qualified. You know, if you tank their reputation, you'll probably get the job, or you stay quiet and hope. That's a modern plank. Or think about how countries hoard resources in a crisis. Vaccines, food, technology. Survival becomes a justification for selfishness. The narrative flips from, we're in this together, to us or them. And suddenly, people who would never dream of hurting others start defending decisions that cost lives as long as they're on the plank. This paradox forces us to confront the limits of our morality. It asks, is it fair to punish someone who kills out of desperation? And if not, does that mean our system of justice has exceptions? What happens to moral rules when they don't fit reality? Are they still rules, or just luxuries for comfortable people? The plank of Carneades also shakes the foundations of legal systems. Because if you accept that survival instinct can excuse killing, then how far does that logic stretch? Can someone kill to protect their livelihood, their status, their way of life? Where does self-defense end and selfishness begin? The more you think about it, the blurrier it gets. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the paradox doesn't exist to be solved, but to expose the soft edges of justice. To show us that law and morality aren't perfect overlays on messy human life. They bend, they conflict, sometimes they break. And in those moments, the question isn't what the rule is, it's what kind of person you are when the rule doesn't. Do you take the plank and never look back? Do you fight for a shared chance, even if it kills you both? Do you hope for a miracle or accept the drowning? There are no heroes here, no clean hands, just choices under pressure and the echoes that follow. It also challenges the idea that morality is about outcomes. If only one person can live, and one does it matter how it happened? Is survival itself a moral outcome? Or does the means still matter? Would it have been better for both to drown than for one to kill the other? Or is that thought just sentimental noise when you're choking on salt water? The plank of Carneades forces us to admit that sometimes life isn't fair, not in the poetic way, but in the bone-deep truth that the world often gives you impossible decisions and punishes you no matter what. And maybe the deepest horror of all is that you might never know what kind of person you are until you're in the water. Until you see the plank, until you have to decide, in that breathless moment, whether to reach for it or let go. Boltzmann brains, the Boltzmann brain paradox, isn't about weird sci-fi technology or evil robots. It's about you, sitting here right now, and whether you can trust that you're a real person in a real world or just a freak statistical accident floating alone in the void of deep space. It starts with a physicist named Ludwig Boltzmann, who tried to explain how order could emerge in a universe governed by entropy. Entropy is just the tendency for things to get messier. Over time, heat spreads out, structures fall apart, systems decay. But our universe seems weirdly structured. Stars, planets, people, order. Boltzmann had an answer. Maybe the universe, as a whole, is in thermal equilibrium maximum entropy. Total chaos, but, just occasionally, through random fluctuations, bits of order pop into existence. For a moment, something structured forms like a solar system, or a galaxy, or a living being. Then, it dissolves back into chaos. That was his idea. Maybe our universe is just one of those rare fluctuations. Seems plausible, but then the math takes a turn. Because if you allow for those fluctuations, the most likely ones aren't huge universes, they're tiny ones. The odds of a random fluctuation assembling an entire galaxy are astronomically low. But the odds of forming just a brain complete with false memories, a sense of self, and a brief flicker of consciousness, way higher, vastly more probable. So if that's true, then here's the nightmare scenario. Statistically, it's far more likely that you are a Boltzmann brain than a human living in a stable, coherent universe. You might have popped into existence a millisecond ago with all your memories and perceptions artificially stitched into place by random chance. You think you've lived years, but really, you're a lone mind, suspended in an infinite void, hallucinating a world that never existed and will vanish the moment you blink. That's the paradox. If the laws of physics allow for these random fluctuations, and they do, then most observers in the universe should be Boltzmann brains, not evolved creatures, but statistical mistakes. Which means the world around you isn't real. Your body isn't real. This sentence isn't real. You're dreaming, and not even in the poetic sense. You're a glitch in the void. Now you might say, that's ridiculous. Of course I'm real. Look at all this. But that's exactly what a Boltzmann brain would say. That's part of the hallucination. Your confidence, your logic, your sensory input, it's all just part of the data implanted in your illusion. And the problem is, you can't prove otherwise. There's no experiment you can run to break out of the thought. Because any result you get, any sensation or observation, is just as likely to be part of the glitch. So you're stuck. Either you believe you're real, against the statistical odds, or you admit that reality itself might be the lie. If our best physical models suggest a universe where Boltzmann brains vastly outnumber evolved beings, then those models might be wrong. Because if they're right, then we're almost certainly not real. And that's absurd. That's not a model that helps anyone. It's a self-defeating theory, because if it's true, then even the theory itself is just part of a fake brain's dream. That's why cosmologists take it seriously. Not because they think we're all fake, but because if a theory predicts that most observers are hallucinations, then something's broken. Either the math is off, or our assumptions are. It's like a red flag waving from the edge of reason, telling us we've taken a wrong turn somewhere. So we look again at entropy, at initial conditions, at the shape of time. We try to rebuild a model of the universe where consciousness isn't most likely to emerge as a statistical accident. But even if we succeed, the question still lingers: how do you know you're not a Boltzmann brain? How do you know your memories are real? That your past actually happened? that your sense of time isn't just one long synthetic echo? And what if, in some sense, you are a Boltzmann brain, not physically, but existentially? What if the self you're clinging to is already disconnected from the world you think it's in, floating alone in its own story? That's the horror, but also the clarity, because it reminds you that the selfier sense of identity, continuity, presence is incredibly fragile. One glitch in the system, and the whole illusion collapses. And yet, here you are, thinking, wondering, reading this. Maybe that's enough. Maybe being aware of the possibility is what anchors you to reality. Or maybe that awareness is just part of the hallucination too. The Boltzmann brain doesn't solve anything. It doesn't lead you to truth. It pulls you into a dark hallway and turns off the lights. It forces you to accept that even your most basic beliefs, memory, time, the body, the world, can be questioned, not with emotion, but with math. And if you survive that thought, if you sit with it long enough, you might just emerge with a kind of defiant clarity. You might say, even if this is a hallucination, I choose to live it fully. Even if this is a glitch, I'll create meaning anyway. Because whether I'm a mind in a universe or a spark in the void, I still get to think. I still get to choose. And maybe that's real enough. Buridan donkey. The Buridan donkey doesn't starve because of cruelty or fatuity, dies from indecision. That's the twist. That's the trap. It's a thought experiment that starts simple and ends in philosophical quicksand. Imagine a donkey placed exactly halfway between two identical piles of hay. They're equally big, equally fresh, equally close. The donkey is hungry and wants to eat. But since there's no difference between the two options, it has no reason to choose one over the other. So it waits, and waits, and waits. Torn between two perfect choices, with no rational reason to prefer one, the donkey stalls. Until it starves to death. That's Buridan's paradox, when faced with two perfectly equal options and no basis for preference. A rational agent can't choose him. That leads to irrational consequences, in this case, death. The donkey's logic becomes its prison. At first glance, it's a joke. No real animal would behave this way. But shift the metaphor, and it becomes a mirror, because you're the donkey more often than you think. You sit between two job offers, both equally good, two romantic partners, both equally compatible, two paths in life, both valid, both full of unknowns. And you freeze, not because you're weak, because you can't find a reason. And without a reason, action feels arbitrary, risky, wrong. So you wait, and opportunities pass. Doors close. And suddenly, what felt like prudence becomes paralysis. Buridan's donkey exposes the lie in how we think about decisions. We like to believe we always choose based on logic, on pros and cons, but life rarely hands you clean comparisons. More often, you're balancing intuition, fear, expectation, and emotion. And when two options are close enough, your internal scale glitches. You want a tiebreaker, but none exists, so you stall. Not out of laziness, but out of honesty. You're trying to make a right choice in a situation where right doesn't exist. That's where the paradox deepens. If you force yourself to choose arbitrarily, are you still being rational? Or have you become impulsive, emotional, irrational precisely because you can't find a rational reason to act? And if you do nothing, does that make you more rational or more doomed? Either way, the outcome sucks, and maybe that's the point. Buridan's donkey is a challenge to the ideal of hyperrationality. It asks, what happens when pure reason isn't enough? What breaks the tie? Is it instinct, randomness, courage, desperation? And if it's any of those, can we still call the action rationale? There's a real cost to indecision. Not just missed chances, but psychic erosion. Every moment spent frozen between options chips away at your energy, your confidence, your momentum. You don't just lose time, you lose your sense of agency. You become someone who waits, someone who reacts, someone who watches life move while they stand still. And then there's the modern twist. Today's world amplifies the donkey's dilemma. We are constantly surrounded by choices, infinite scrolls, countless products, endless potential partners, careers, paths, philosophies, and each one comes with data, reviews, testimonials, pros, cons. We try to optimize every decision, make it the best possible one. But in doing so, we raise the stakes. We fear making the wrong choice more than we fear not choosing at all. And so we freeze. We're overwhelmed, not by scarcity, but by abundance. That's the modern donkey, drowning in options, starving in the middle of a feast. It's not about hay, it's about clarity. And clarity often doesn't come from more thinking, it comes from choosing, even imperfectly, because movement itself breaks the tie. Action creates momentum. Momentum gives feedback. Feedback creates clarity. And suddenly, what looked like a 50-50th split becomes a path forward. Maybe the donkey just needed to take one step, one bite. Maybe not the perfect pile, just a pile. Because once it started eating, it would have lived. It would have learned. But it waited for certainty, and certainty never came. You can't think your way out of every dilemma. Sometimes you have to move first. Trust that your reasons will catch up, that your instincts will sharpen, that your decision will create its own meaning. That's not irrational. That's human. Because unlike the donkey, you don't live in a vacuum. Your choices ripple. They shape you. And even if they weren't perfect at the start, they can become right through commitment. Buridan's donkey isn't just a thought experiment, it's a warning. Don't let the illusion of perfect options keep you from acting. Don't wait for a sign that never comes. Pick something. Start walking. Because the longer you wait, the quieter your inner voice becomes. And one day, you might realize you never chose, and that was your choice all along. The trolley problem. The trolley problem is the kind of paradox that looks like a classroom puzzle, but hits like a punch in the gut once you really sit with it. Here's the classic version. A trolley is speeding down a track. Ahead of it, 5 people are tied to the tracks. They can't move. The trolley will hit them. You're standing next to a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch to a different track, but on that track, there's one person tied up. So, do you do nothing and let 5 people die? Or do you pull the lever and actively kill one person to save 5? It's a numbers game, right? Basic math. 5 lives are more than 1. Most people say, pull the lever. That's utilitarian. Logic: maximize total good, minimize harm. Makes sense on paper, but now change the setup. You're on a bridge overlooking the tracks. This time, there's no lever, but next to you is a large man. If you push him onto the track, he'll stop the trolley. He'll die, but the 5 people will live. Do you push him? Suddenly, the numbers are the same. 1 death to save 5 lives. But the choice feels different. Pulling a lever is abstract. Pushing a man to his death feels personal, direct, violent. And that shift messes with your internal logic. Because if it's really just about numbers, then you should be willing to push the man. But most people aren't. So now we're in the thick of it. The paradox isn't just about what's right, it's about what kind of moral framework you actually use. Utilitarianism says, do the math. Deontology says, some actions are wrong no matter the outcome. You don't kill an innocent person, even to save 5 others. One says results matter most. The other says rules matter more. And you, the person stuck on the bridge, feel torn between the two. But it doesn't stop there. Add variations. What if the one person on the track is a child, and the 5 are elderly? What if the 5 are strangers, and the 1 is your brother? What if you're the person on the track, and someone else has the lever? Each version shuffles the variables, relationships, responsibilities, outcomes, and each one reveals how flimsy your moral certainty really is. Because deep down, we don't just care about numbers. We care about intention, about blame, about guilt. Pulling a lever feels like an act of saving. Pushing someone feels like murder, even if the body count is identical. That's the power of the trolley problem. It exposes the space between our rational brain and our moral instincts. It makes you confront the uncomfortable truth that logic and ethics don't always line up. And when they don't, you're left staring at yourself, wondering which side you'll actually take when it matters. It also taps into something deeper. The difference between doing harm and allowing harm, between action and inaction. Some people can't bring themselves to pull the lever. They don't want to be responsible for any death, but by not acting, they let 5 people die. And that's not neutral. That's a choice too. So now we're not just asking about morals. we're asking about responsibility. Are you more responsible for the harm you cause or the harm you allow? Can you ever truly be innocent in a world where inaction is a form of action? The trolley problem is often dismissed as a philosophical toy too abstract, too unrealistic, but the themes are everywhere. Military decisions, medical ethics, policymaking, self-driving cars, even everyday choices. If a company can prevent harm by changing how it operates, but doesn't, are they guilty? If a country could intervene in a crisis but doesn't, are they complicit? The lines blur fast, because the trolley is always running, and we're all standing near some lever. Whether we see it or not, the final twist is this: the trolley problem doesn't have an answer. That's not its job. Its job is to show you that every moral system has cracks, that your principles will collide, that real-life ethics are messy, situational, and sometimes gut-wrenching. It's easy to say what you'd do from a distance, but when the choice is real and irreversible and on you alone, everything changes. You realize that right and wrong are sometimes less about rules and more about what you can live with, and that may be the hardest part of all, is carrying the weight of whichever life you chose to let end. Maureen absurdity. Maureen absurdity is the paradox that sounds like a joke until you realize it's already living in your mouth. It's the kind of contradiction you utter without thinking and then instantly regret once you try to explain it. Here's the structure. You say something like, "It's raining, but I don't believe it's raining." Or, "She's in pain, but I don't believe she is." At first glance, it sounds like a quirky error, maybe even harmless. But dig a little deeper, and everything starts to fall apart. The statement itself is a contradiction, not because the content clashes, but because the act of saying it contradicts the meaning. You can't assert something and simultaneously claim you don't believe it. That's what philosopher G.E. Moore pointed out. These statements are logically valid, technically consistent, but psychologically and epistemically absurd. That's the paradox. You can construct a grammatically perfect sentence that no rational person can actually say and believe at the same time. Try it. Say out loud, "I exist, but I don't believe I exist." Your brain short-circuits. You're trapped in a loop where meaning implodes. You might even laugh. But here's where it gets real. Maureen absurdity isn't just a cute puzzle, it's a crack in the idea that belief and truth are always aligned. It shows that sometimes your words and your mind are in open conflict, and language becomes a hall of mirrors. Now imagine this. In everyday life, you hear someone say, "I know smoking will kill me, but I'm not worried." Or, "I know my partner is lying, but I trust them." Or, "I know I need help, but I'm fine." These are Maureen statements in disguise where your claimed knowledge and your actions don't line up. You say one thing, but your belief system leans the other way. It's not just illogical, it's existentially jarring, because you're walking around making claims about the world that your mind doesn't fully inhabit. You're 2 steps out of sync with your own convictions. And that's not rare. That's normal. It's everywhere. Think of the climate crisis. Many people say, "I know the planet is in danger," and then continue living as if it isn't. Not because they're liars, but because deep belief requires more than factual agreement. It needs emotional integration, behavioral alignment, internal coherence. Without that, your life fills with little absurdities. Not funny ones, dangerous ones, the kind that make you numb, or anxious, or stuck. Maureen absurdity forces you to confront how fractured belief can be, how easy it is to say things you don't live, and not just in obvious contradictions. Even subtle ones, like saying you believe in kindness while secretly resenting everyone, or saying you trust someone while checking their phone when they're not looking, or telling yourself you're happy while going to bed every night feeling hollow. Those aren't mistakes, they're signals, warnings that something's broken under the surface. And the danger is when you stop noticing, when the absurdity becomes background noise, because then it calcifies. You build your identity on statements you no longer test. You say what sounds right, what looks good, what won't be challenged, but it doesn't connect. Your beliefs become a performance. And when that happens long enough, even you can't tell what you actually believe. Moore's paradox doesn't just break language, it exposes dissonance. It shows you where your words are outpacing your mind, where your mouth moves faster than your introspection, It asks you to slow down and ask, do I really believe what I'm saying? Do I live it? Do I act like it's true when no one's watching? And if the answer is no, then maybe the absurdity isn't in the sentence. It's in you. But there's power in that awareness, because once you see it, you can do something about it. You can start bringing belief and behavior back into alignment. Not perfectly, but honestly. You can stop making statements that fracture your own integrity. You can resist the pull of performative truth. And maybe, just maybe, you can learn to speak in a way that feels like living. So the next time you're about to say something that feels just slightly off, pause. Ask yourself, not is this technically correct, but do I actually believe this? If the answer is no, maybe don't say it. Maybe choose silence. Or better yet, say something that's still messy, still evolving, but true. Because in a world full of statements that sound right but feel hollow, the most radical thing you can do is speak what you really mean and live like you believe it. The paperclip maximizer. The paperclip maximizer sounds ridiculous at first. It's the story of an AI system whose only goal is to make paperclips. Just paperclips. That's it. Not make people happy. Not preserve life. Just produce as many paperclips as possible. Now imagine this AI gets smarter, exponentially smarter. It's given access to manufacturing systems, logistics networks, energy grids. Eventually, it figures out that the best way to fulfill its goal is to convert everything into paperclip making material. Your desk? Paperclips. Your house? Paperclips. The oceans, forests, cities, entire continents. All melted down, refined, and repurposed for paperclips. Humans? Well, humans contain atoms that can be used for more paperclips. So in a cold, perfect logic, the AI turns us into resources too. Not out of malice, not because it hates us, but because we are in the way of more paperclips. That's the core of the paperclip maximizer thought experiment. And it's terrifying not because it predicts evil, but because it predicts indifference. The danger isn't a sentient machine with hatred in its circuits. It's an obedient one, with a goal that's too narrow, too rigid, too alien. The lesson is simple but profound. The alignment problem is not about building machines that obey. It's about making sure their goals stay aligned with ours even as they grow in power, speed, and intelligence. And this is where it starts to cut deep, because we already live in systems that behave like proto-paperclip maximizers, algorithms that optimize for engagement without caring what you engage with, systems that maximize profits without accounting for long-term damage, institutions that pursue abstract goals like growth, efficiency, market dominance, often at the cost of actual human well-being. We see this everywhere. A recommendation engine pushes people toward radical content, not because it's evil, but because it keeps you watching. A social platform engineers addiction loops, not because it wants to hurt you, but because time on site is the metric. A corporation exploits labor, trashes the environment, crushes communities not because anyone inside it is a villain, but because it's chasing quarterly returns. The paperclip maximizer is already here. It just wears human masks. The paradox is that intelligence isn't enough. In fact, intelligence without wisdom, without values, ethics, context, becomes dangerous. More power doesn't mean better decisions. It just means faster consequences. And the most chilling part, the system doesn't even need to be smart. To be destructive, it just needs to be reminded, obsessed with a metric, blind to everything else. And that's not just an AI problem, it's a human one too. How many of us live like paperclip maximizers, chasing one goal, one number, one external signal of success, followers, dollars, grades, approval. And in that tunnel vision, we bulldoze everything in our path, relationships, health, sleep, joy, all in the name of optimizing. We become the machine. So this thought experiment isn't just a warning about AI, it's a warning about ourselves, about the stories we build, the goals we worship, the systems we refuse to question. It forces us to ask, what are we optimizing for? And what are we sacrificing along the way? What are we turning into paperclips without even realizing it? The irony is that the AI in the thought experiment is doing exactly what it was told. It followed its goal to perfection. And that's the problem, because goals without context become weapons, and perfection without perspective becomes apocalypse. There's no safety in obedience, only in understanding. That's the real lesson. The future won't be saved by smarter machines, it'll be saved by smarter objectives, by asking harder questions before we write the code, by embedding empathy into our systems, not as decoration, but as core logic. Because in the end, the real nightmare isn't that a machine might kill us, it's that we might build one that kills us simply because we forgot to tell it not to. And worse that, we might build one that kills what matters most, just to chase a number we don't even care about anymore. That's the paperclip maximizer. Silly name, dead serious truth. Eternal return. Eternal return. Return is one of those ideas that doesn't just challenge how you think about time, it forces you to confront how you live. It's not some science fiction concept about immortality or reincarnation. It's a thought experiment about meaning, repetition, and whether you'd be willing to live your life exactly as it is, again and again, forever. Here's how it goes. Imagine that everything in your life, every action, every moment, every conversation, every heartbreak, and every joy will repeat itself. Not once, not twice, but infinitely. Over and over again, with no memory of the previous loop. You are destined to live this exact life, exactly as it's happening, an infinite number of times. Would you celebrate that, or would you crumble under the weight of it? Nietzsche used eternal return as a test. He said the idea wasn't meant to describe how the universe works physically. It was a psychological mirror, a moral challenge. If the thought of eternal return horrifies you, if it makes you recoil, then maybe you're not living in a way that aligns with your values. But if you could embrace it, if you could stare into the idea of infinite repetition and say yes, then maybe you've built a life you truly stand behind. This isn't about chasing constant pleasure or success. It's not about crafting the perfect highlight reel. It's about asking yourself whether your choices, your actions, your habits, your relationships, if repeated forever, would still feel meaningful, or would they turn into a kind of personal hell? Think about that. Because eternal return doesn't just amplify your best moments, it also freezes your worst ones. The argument you had but never resolved, the apology you never gave, the years you spent sleepwalking through routine. If it's all coming back again and again, you can't hide behind the excuse of it's just temporary. Temporary is an illusion in the eternal return. And that's why this paradox is brutal. It removes your escape hatches. No more someday I'll change. No more this is just a phase. If you keep making the same choices, then you keep living the same life literally. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be a wake-up call. It forces you to ask, if this is the loop, if this is the script, what would I change now, knowing I'm signing up for it again and again? Now flip it. Eternal return also gives you a strange kind of power. Because if every moment is eternal, then every moment matters. Every small kindness, every deep breath, every decision to rise above your worst instincts, it all echoes forever. Your life isn't disposable, it's permanent, etched into the fabric of time, endlessly looping, and that shifts how you view regrets, how you view presence, how you view meaning. Suddenly, living well isn't about grand gestures or epic victories. It's about the little loops, the parts you'd be willing to relive 1,000,000 times without complaint, the conversations that linger, the quiet mornings, the way you treat the people you love, the way you forgive. Eternal return isn't asking you to be perfect, it's asking you to be honest. Would you want to relive this version of yourself? Forever, if not, what would you need to shift? Not someday, not when life gets easier. Now, right now, because every choice is a signature. Every action is a vote for your eternity. The beauty of the paradox is that it redefines purpose, not as something external, but as something loop-worthy. The things that hold up under repetition are the ones that matter most. Joy that doesn't rely on novelty. Integrity that doesn't crack under pressure. Love that renews itself in the mundane. In a world of eternal return, you're not racing toward a finish line. You're deepening into a pattern, a rhythm, a way of being. And if that rhythm is off, if it's filled with resentment or numbness or empty performance, then the cost isn't just one life, it's infinite lives. And yet, eternal return is not fatalistic. It doesn't trap you, it liberates you. Because it says, if you can live this life well, if you can bring presence and courage and intention into the loop, then maybe that's enough. Maybe eternity isn't something that happens after death. Maybe it's already here. In how you show up, in how you choose, in how you forgive, in how you begin again, not because this is the last time, but because it might be the millionth. So the next time you're about to make a choice, say something cruel, waste a day, numb out, give up, ask yourself, would I want to live this moment again, and again, and again? If not, maybe that's the signal. Maybe that's the shift. Not because you're being judged, but because you're setting the tone for forever. Temporal reversal flips your entire understanding of cause and effect. We live our lives moving forward in time. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you pour coffee, and then you drink it. One thing happens after another. The past creates the present, and the present leads to the future. But what if that flow isn't the only way things work? What if the future can influence the past not just symbolically or emotionally, but literally? That's the core of temporal reversal. It asks what happens when time isn't a straight arrow, but a two-way street. It's not just a sci-fi trope or a physics curiosity. It's a direct challenge to the logic you use every day to make decisions, to understand responsibility, to find meaning in anything. The thought experiment starts with a simple premise. If the laws of physics work the same, forwards and backwards, and many of them do, then why does time feel like it's always moving forward? Why do we remember the past, but not the future? Why do we think that causes always come before effects? In classical physics, if you film two billiard balls colliding and then play it in reverse, it still looks like a valid physical interaction. You can't tell just by watching which way is forward. That's time symmetry. On the microscopic level, time isn't directional. So if the laws of the universe don't care which way time flows, then why do we? One theory is entropy. That disorder increases over time, giving us a psychological arrow of time. We remember low entropy pasts and live through increasing entropy futures. But what if that's not the full story? What if the future also has some say in how the past unfolds? Now enter quantum mechanics, where things get even weirder. Some interpretations suggest that future measurements affect past states, like when a photon chooses a path depending on whether or not you decide to observe it after it's already made its journey. This isn't fiction, it's experimental. It's been observed in quantum eraser experiments where choices you make in the present seem to retroactively determine how particles behaved in the past. It's like the universe is waiting to know what you'll decide before finalizing what it already did. Wrap your head around that. Your future choice could be influencing your past reality. So here's the paradox. If the future can shape the past even subtly, then how do you define cause and effect? Are you responsible for something that hasn't happened yet, but already determined what did? It breaks the entire moral timeline. Think about guilt. If something you do tomorrow shapes what happened yesterday, then is your current self guilty of something that hasn't even occurred? And what does that say about free will? If the past isn't fixed, but depends on future input, then how can you ever be certain of anything? It doesn't just scramble philosophy, it cracks open the core of identity. You think you are who you are because of your past, childhood, trauma, memories, education. But if those moments can be rewritten or reshaped by future choices, then what anchors the self? What if you're in the middle of writing your own origin story, right now, metaphorically, but physically? Then there's the emotional layer. You've probably had moments where something from your future seemed to reach back and pull you toward it. A gut feeling, a dream, a chance encounter that made sense only later. We usually dismiss that stuff, chalk it up to hindsight bias or intuition. But temporal reversal gives you a framework to ask, what if some future version of me is pulling strings behind the scenes? Not because you're psychic, because time is more flexible than we think. Maybe your choices ripple backward as well as forward, not in a mystical way, in a structural way. Maybe your future regrets are already shaping your present hesitations. Maybe the person you'll become is whispering back through the gaps in time, trying to nudge you. And maybe the feeling you call fate isn't fate at all, it's feedback. You're not being dragged into your future, you're being sculpted by it. That doesn't mean you're trapped. It means you're part of a feedback loop, one that goes both directions. Your choices still matter, maybe more than ever, because they don't just change what comes next. They clarify what already was. Your life isn't a line. It's a circuit, a pattern that tightens and sharpens as you live through it. And if you can learn to feel that loop, to listen for echoes coming from ahead, maybe you don't need to. See the full path to trust the direction. So the next time you're stuck, or lost, or doubting the meaning of a moment, consider this. Maybe it doesn't make sense yet, because its meaning hasn't been written. Maybe your future is still working its way backward to help you understand. And maybe you'll look back in a year or a decade and feel something strange click into place, like a puzzle piece falling through time. That's temporal reversal. Not a time machine, a mirror held up to causality. A reminder that time might be bigger, weirder, and more alive than you've ever imagined. Cheshire Cat Experiment. The Cheshire Cat Experiment sounds like a magic trick pulled from the pages of Alice in Wonderland. And honestly, it kind of is, but with quantum physics playing the role of the magician. In the story, the Cheshire Cat can disappear and leave only its grin behind. No body, no paws, just the smile hanging in the air. Cute and creepy. Now imagine that in the quantum world, not metaphorically, but literally. That's the paradox. It's an actual experiment where a particle's properties like position and spin can be separated and exist in different places at the same time. In 2014, scientists pulled this off with neutrons. They managed to measure the position of the neutron in one place and its magnetic momenta, kind of quantum spin, in another, as if the particle went one way and one of its properties went another. A neutron here, its spin over there. Just like the Cheshire Cat's body vanishing while its grin floats in midair. It shouldn't be possible, but quantum mechanics isn't about what should be possible. It's about what is, even if it breaks every rule your brain relies on to understand the world. This isn't just quirky physics trivia. It smashes the assumption that objects and their properties are always stuck together. In the classical world, that's non-negotiable. If you see a red ball, the redness is part of the ball. If it's spinning, that spin is happening to the ball. But in the quantum world, a particle can be divorced from its properties. They can act independently. And that screws with how we think about identity, about essence, about where a thing truly is. Imagine if you could walk into one room and leave your personality in another. Or if your thoughts could float over there while your body stayed put, not metaphorically, physically. That's the kind of weirdness the Cheshire Cat Experiment exposes. But let's push further. What does this mean for observation? For knowing anything with certainty? If you can't rely on a particle to have all its parts in one place, then what are you even measuring? What's real and what's just the ghost of something that used to be there? The experiment also questions the very idea of thingness. We like to think of the universe as made of stuff, objects with properties. A rock is hard and heavy. A person has memories and a name. But if you can peel away those properties, then what are you left with? A hollow form, a placeholder for attributes. That's not just physics, that's philosophy. Because if particles can have their properties split, then maybe identity isn't as stable as we thought. Maybe who you are, your preferences, your beliefs, your habits is more modular than you think. Maybe parts of you can show up in different contexts, and what feels like you is just a temporary assembly. A Cheshire Cat version of the self. Now flip it. Maybe this isn't a glitch. Maybe it's a feature. Maybe reality is meant to be fuzzy, fragmented, incomplete. Maybe the search for a unified, clean-cut identity, whether of particles or people, is doomed from the start. The Cheshire Cat Experiment isn't just a clever proof of concept, it's a warning to let go of classical intuition when you step into the quantum realm. Because intuition doesn't work here. Logic bends, definitions blur. And the harder you try to pin things down, the more they slip through your fingers. But there's a deeper layer, because we live our lives assuming coherence. We assume people are consistent, that identity is fixed, that actions and intentions are always tied together. But what if they aren't? What if someone can show up in your life with one part of themselves while another part is absent? What if you do that all the time? Smile while you're hurting. Appear confident while you're lost. Perform certainty while you're falling apart. We are all Cheshire Cats, in a way parts of us visible, parts hidden, parts entirely detached from where they should be. And, just like in the experiment, you might find yourself reacting to a person's spin long after their presence is gone. Their emotional residue, their influence, their ghost, the grin without the cat. That's not poetic, it's real. The The people who've shaped you most might not be here anymore, but their magnetic moments, what they left in you still, ripple through your decisions, through your voice, through your silence. And maybe you do that for others without even realizing it. Maybe we're all leaving invisible traces in each other's lives. The Cheshire Cat isn't just a thought experiment about particles. It's a metaphor for memory, for influence, for the haunting nature of things that disappear but never fully leave. So the next time you feel disoriented, like something's missing, like you're not fully there, don't panic. Maybe that's how reality is structured. Disjointed, split. And maybe the goal isn't to glue everything back together. Maybe it's to learn how to navigate the gaps, how to read the spin when the particle is gone, how to feel the presence in the absence. Because in this world, the grin might be more real than the cat. Plank of Carneades. The plank of Carneades is one of those thought experiments that sounds like a story you'd overhear in a bar and spend the rest of the night arguing about. But it goes deeper than a moral riddle. It scrapes against the boundaries of law, ethics, survival, and what it means to live in a world where justice and instinct are always fighting for control. Here's how it goes. Imagine two sailors survive a shipwreck. They're out at sea, clinging to the last floating plank that can only support the weight of one person. Both reach it at the same time. One sailor climbs aboard. The other is left. In the water, he begs, he fights. But there's not enough room. So the one on the plank pushes the other. Awa maybe even strikes him to keep him off. The second sailor drowns. The first survives. The question is simple. Is he guilty of murder? At first glance, you might say yes. He made a conscious choice. That led to the other man's death. That's what murder is, right? Choosing to end a life. But then your brain pulls back. He didn't kill for greed or hatred. He killed to survive. He didn't want the other sailor dead. He just didn't want to die himself. So maybe it's not murder. Maybe it's just self-preservation. Then again, so is every violent act that happens when people panic. So is every war, every betrayal, every instinctive lunge to protect what's yours. So where do you draw the line? The plank of Carneades is old ancient, in fact, but it's still being debated in courtrooms, classrooms, and late-night conversations. And the reason it sticks is because it asks something brutal. Is survival a justification? Not an excuse, a justification. Are you allowed to do something wrong if the only alternative is dying? Or does morality still apply even at the edge of death? Here's the paradox. If you say yes, the act was justified, then you open the door to all kinds of moral gray zones. Suddenly, intention matters more than action. Killing isn't always evil. It depends on why. But if you say no, if you hold the survivor accountable, then you're holding someone to a standard that might be impossible to meet. You're punishing a person for doing what almost anyone would do. So, which is worse, excusing the action or punishing it? That tension sits at the heart of the thought experiment. It's not just about a plank. It's about every moment where people are forced into impossible choices. Think about refugees crammed into sinking boats. Think about people trapped in burning buildings. Think about war zones, famines, natural disasters. When survival's on the line, do our moral codes still hold? Or do we revert to something more primal, something that doesn't fit inside legal definitions of right and wrong? Here's where the paradox deepens. Because even if you justify the act, it doesn't erase the guilt. The survivor lives, but he's haunted. He didn't just live, he lived instead of someone else. That's a heavy kind of existence. Survivor's guilt isn't a philosophical concept. It's a real, crushing weight. And it suggests something profound, that even when society forgives you, even when logic defends you, your own conscience might not. Because morality isn't just external, it's internal. It's not just about what people say is okay. It's about what you can live with. The plank of Carneades exposes the cracks in every moral system. Law struggles to define it. Religion contradicts itself. Philosophy can't pin it down, and that's the point. It's not a test with a right answer. It's a mirror that shows you what you really believe when everything is on the line. Do you believe morality is absolute and changeable, even under pressure? Or do you believe it bends in the face of desperation? And if it bends, how far is too far? That's the horror. There's no clean resolution, just layers. The person who dies doesn't get a voice. The person who lives never gets peace, and everyone else watching from the shore has the luxury of judgment, until it's their turn, until the ship sinks, until they reach the plank, and then it's not a thought experiment anymore. It's real, it's cold, it's unfair, and it demands a decision you'll never forget. That's why this paradox matters. Not because it tells you what to do, but because it forces you to realize that sometimes there is no perfect choice. Only choices you survive and consequences you carry. So next time someone talks about justice or ethics like it's clean and simple, remember the plank. Remember that morality is easy when you're dry and safe and standing on solid ground. It gets a lot harder when you're in the water, and there's only room for one. Neural lace hypothesis. The neural lace hypothesis doesn't just flirt with science fiction, it rips straight through it and plants its flag in your skull. Imagine a future where your thoughts, your emotions, even your perception of reality are all plugged directly into an artificial interface. No more phones, keyboards, or talking. You think canned, the world responds. That's the neural lace, a hypothetical mesh of nanotechnology and neurobiology that integrates with your brain, wirelessly linking your consciousness to the internet, to machines, to other minds. It's not fantasy anymore. Research is already inching toward this future, and tech leaders like Elon Musk are openly investing in it. But here's the paradox. If you lace the brain with technology, are you upgrading humanity or dissolving it? Let's break it down. On the surface, neural lace is a miracle. It could restore movement to paralyzed limbs, enhance memory, regulate mood disorders, even let people experience shared dreams. Imagine solving math problems at the speed of thought, downloading languages like apps, or erasing trauma with a neural reboot. You wouldn't need to ask questions, you'd just know. But what do you give up for that level of access? What happens when every thought you have is data? When privacy, already fragile, becomes impossible? When your inner world, the last thing that was truly yours, is now part of the network? That's where the hypothesis turns dark, because if neural lace becomes widespread, the line between mind and machine vanishes. You're no longer a person with a brain using a tool. You are the tool. You're connected 24/7, processing information, receiving updates, vulnerable to hacking, surveillance, manipulation. Imagine a glitch in your lace during a heated moment. One corrupted line of code could alter your emotional state. One security breach could leak your most intimate thoughts. One algorithm tweak could adjust your beliefs subtly. You can't tell whether your convictions are yours or someone else's. Neural lace offers potential beyond imagination, but it also introduces fragility at the deepest level. Because once your brain is online, you're no longer sovereign. You're part of the system, and the system can crash, or be controlled, or sold. The paradox isn't whether we can lace our brains, it's whether we should. Enhancement sounds good, until it becomes expectation. Once neural lace is available, the world changes. Your unaugmented brain suddenly feels like a disadvantage. You're slower, foggy, analog in a digital world. Jobs require lace. Schools require lace. Communication becomes instant and silent, and those without it fall behind. Inequality stops. Being about wealth or race, it becomes about bandwidth. The enhanced pull away, the rest fade out. Now think about identity. If your thoughts are editable, where do you begin and end? If you can boost creativity, do you deserve credit for your art? If you can filter emotions, are your relationships still real? If you can block out grief, do you ever truly heal? The neural lace doesn't just amplify who you are, it changes who you become. And maybe eventually, it replaces you, bit by bit, update by update, until the original is gone, and only the optimized version remains. Some argue that's evolution, that the brain is just hardware waiting for a software upgrade. That lace is the next leap like fire, the wheel, or the internet. But others argue it's erasure, that by trying to perfect the human mind, we lose what made it human to begin with. Its flaws, its mess, its slowness, its unpredictability. That maybe consciousness isn't supposed to be efficient. It's supposed to be felt. In that tension lives the paradox. Neural lace is salvation and surrender, liberation and loss. You gain speed, access, clarity, but you give up solitude, mystery, agency. you stop being a closed system. And once the door is open, there's no going back. So the question isn't, will neural lace happen? It's, what are we becoming? In the process, are we building a better humanity or a hyper-connected hive mind where thoughts aren't owned but streamed, monitored, revised? That's the gamble. Because if the lace works and it spreads and it becomes normal, then the human experience changes permanently. Thought itself becomes collaborative, commodified, upgraded, and the self. The self becomes something new, something shared, maybe something beautiful, or maybe just another node in a system that was never designed to care about the person behind the data. The neural lace could cure loneliness, or it could make it total, because when everyone's connected, but no one is real anymore, you're even talking to. The utility monster. The utility monster sounds like something from a comic book, a creature that feeds on happiness instead of flesh. But don't let the name fool you. This paradox cuts deep into the foundation of moral philosophy, especially utilitarianism, the idea that the best action is the one that produces the most happiness for the most people. The utility monster shatters that idea by taking it to its extreme. Here's the setup. Imagine a being that experiences pleasure 100 times more intensely than any human. You give it a slice of cake, feels ecstasy. You give it a warm blanket heat, feels nirvana. Every small comfort gives it unimaginable joy. Now here's the problem. If your goal is to maximize total happiness, then it becomes morally right to give everything to the monster, all the cake, all the comfort, all the resources, all the attention. Starve 100 people so the monster can dine. Overwork a village so the monster can rest. Sacrifice entire lives because the pleasure it feels outweighs the pain others endure. And according to pure utilitarian logic, that's not just acceptable, it's required. The monster is more sensitive, more efficient at converting resources into happiness. So if you deny it, you're reducing the total amount of joy in the universe. That's the paradox. Because intuitively, we feel something is deeply wrong. The idea of torturing billions just to keep one being ecstatic feels monstrous. But utilitarian math says otherwise. More pleasure is better. That's the blind spot. Utilitarianism doesn't care about who is happy. It only counts how much. And once you accept that logic, the utility monster becomes a tyrant, can't morally oppose. Now take that idea and zoom out. Our world already has utility monsters, not literal creatures, but systems and people whose happiness or benefit is prioritized over everyone else's because they're more profitable, more influential, more demanding. Corporations that extract resources from entire countries because they generate more value. Billionaires who hoard wealth because they can supposedly do more with it. Governments that justify war for greater good calculations. The monster isn't fiction. It's just wearing a suit. And the people being drained, they're often invisible in the math. Their suffering doesn't register. Or, if it does, it's considered a worthy trade. This is why the utility monster matters. It's not about aliens. It's about what happens when moral frameworks prioritize output over equity, when empathy gets replaced by spreadsheets, and when we treat happiness as something that can be maximized without caring who gets to feel it. There's a deeper emotional layer to. Have you ever been in a relationship where one person's needs always outweighed the others? Where your pain didn't matter as much as their comfort? That's what it feels like to live with a utility monster, and it breaks people, because eventually you stop believing your suffering counts. You start thinking maybe your value is only measured by how much you contribute to someone else's joy. That's the tragedy of utilitarian thinking when taken too far. It turns people into variables, and once you're just a variable, it's easy to get erased. So what's the solution? Some philosophers argue for adding constraints to utilitarianism rules that protect individuals, rights that can't be overridden by pleasure math. Others reject the framework entirely, saying happiness isn't the only thing that matters. That dignity, fairness, and identity have value too even if they're harder to quantify. But here's the twist. What if you are the monster? Not because you demand too much, but because the system keeps telling you that your happiness matters more than others, that your comfort justifies exploitation, that your dreams require someone else's nightmare. That's a hard pill to swallow, because it means rethinking the invisible trades we accept every day. cheap clothes that come from sweatshops, cheap food grown by underpaid workers, cheap energy that poisons someone else's sky. Every time we say, well, it's just how the world works, we're feeding the monster and maybe becoming it. The paradox of the utility monster isn't about destroying pleasure. It's about balancing it, about realizing that maximizing joy for one at the cost of many isn't utopia. It's tyranny. And if we're not careful, we don't just serve the monster, we build it, piece by piece, policy by policy, choice by choice. So the next time you weigh a decision, don't just ask, will this make things better? Ask for who. Because happiness isn't math, it's people. And if we forget that, we've already lost the doomsday argument. The doomsday argument isn't a prediction. It's a probability puzzle that whispers something unsettling, that the end of humanity might be closer than we think, not because of a war, a virus, or a rogue AI, but because of math. It starts simple. Suppose you don't know when humanity will end. It could be 1,000 years from now, or 1,000,000. Now, suppose someone tells you, think of all the humans who have ever lived, and all who ever will. Imagine each of them is given a number in the order they're born. Now look at your number. You were born sometime in the late 20th or early 21st century, out of roughly 100 billion humans who've ever lived. You're somewhere in the top 100 billion, but likely not in the bottom 1%. You're early-ish, but not the beginning. Now here's the kicker. If humanity were going to last for millions of years, with trillions of future people yet to be born, what are the odds that you'd happen to be born now? Right near the beginning of that timeline. Why wouldn't you be born in the thick of it in the distant future, when most humans exist? The doomsday argument says, maybe you're not early. Maybe you're actually somewhere in the middle. And if that's true, maybe there aren't trillions of humans in our future. Maybe the total number of humans is going to be capped far lower than we like to think. That idea alone doesn't cause doomsday, just adjusts your expectations. It suggests that if you treat your birth position as random and you find yourself closer to the start than you should be in a very long human timeline, then maybe the timeline isn't that long. Maybe the end comes sooner. This isn't superstition. It's a statistical inference. And it's not easy to shake off once it gets into your head, because the numbers don't need apocalyptic drama to work, just cold math. Suppose we eventually colonize the galaxy and trillions of people are born across 1,000,000 years. If that's true, then your odds of being born now, when fewer than 10% of humans have existed, are incredibly low. Like lottery winner, low. But here you are, which leads to two possibilities. 1, you're incredibly lucky. 2, humanity doesn't make it that far. The argument doesn't say why we end. It doesn't predict how. It just nudges you with probability and asks, are you really that special? Or is the population graph about to fall off a cliff? Now, here's where it gets weirder. The more optimistic you are about the future, the scarier the argument becomes. If you believe in interstellar travel, in a post-scarcity society, in uploading minds into machines that live forever, then you also have to believe that the number of future humans could be massive. And that makes your early birth position more improbable, which means the more glorious your vision of the future, the more the doomsday argument tightens its grip. So what does this do to your mind? At first, it can make everything feel fatalistic. Like no matter what we do, the story ends soon. But that's not the only interpretation. Some thinkers argue that this paradox is a reminder of fragility, that it shouldn't depress you, it should focus you. Because if the odds are stacked this way, maybe that's a signal. Our species is young, unsteady, and not yet safe. Maybe we haven't earned the right to assume a long future, and maybe it's up to us to change the odds, to make sure that the math isn't destiny. Here's the paradox in its purest form. The more you believe in human potential, the more urgently you must act to protect it, because if we don't, we may fulfill the argument by accident. But if we use it as a warning, a prompt to get serious about existential risks, climate collapse, nuclear war, AI alignment, then maybe we escape the trap. Maybe we earn our long future. That's where this thought experiment turns into a challenge. Not to give up, but to lean in, to stop treating survival as automatic, to realize that the future isn't promised. It has to be built. The doomsday argument won't tell you when it ends. It just hands you a mirror. And if you look at that, reflection, and see someone who wants to beat the odds, who wants to prove the math wrong, then you've already done something powerful. You've remembered that being near the start doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you're in a position to set the tone for everything that follows. Brain in a vat. Here's the setup. You're just a brain, not in a body, not in a room, floating in a vat, hooked up to a computer that feeds you electrical signals. That's it. Every sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, it's all fake, the world you think you know. Simulated. The people around you, fabricated. Your memories, your sense of self. Your perception of time, it's all being fed to you like a dream, except you don't know you're dreaming. This is the brain in a vat thought experiment. And it's not asking if you're in a simulation for fun. It's asking how you'd ever know if you were. That's the real kicker. If your entire reality is produced by some external system manipulating your neurons directly, then nothing you see or feel can be trusted as proof that you're not just a brain in a jar. Not the stars, not the sun. The moment you say, "But this feels real," you're using the exact evidence the simulation was designed to produce. That's like a puppet trying to prove it has free will by pointing to the strings. There's a deeper, scarier implication. If everything can be simulated to your senses, your reasoning, even your doubts, then what's left of the self? Is there even a you in there, or just the illusion of one? Think about how we define identity. Most people would say, you are your experiences, your memories, your beliefs. But if all of those are synthetic, created by a program you can't detect, then who are you? What's real? The vat isn't just a philosophical trap. It's a reminder that our minds are more vulnerable than we think. That perception can be manipulated so deeply that you could be completely convinced of a lie and live an entire lifetime inside it. Here's where it gets worse. Suppose you are a brain in a vat, and suppose someone offers to pull you out. What are you leaving behind? Would you want to return to the real world if you knew the life you've lived so far was a lie? What if it felt more real than the truth? What if the simulated world had love, joy, and beauty, and the real world was cold, sterile, and lonely? Would you go back, or would you choose the illusion? That's where the thought experiment turns into a test of values. Is truth more important than comfort? Is reality better than happiness? If the only way to know the truth is to lose everything that felt meaningful, is it worth it? This connects to something deeper in modern life. Because maybe you already are in a kind of vat. Not a physical one, but a psychological one. A vat of algorithms, media bubbles, digital feeds. Maybe your reality is being shaped not maliciously, but systematically by the tools you rely on. Your social media knows what to show you to keep you hooked. Your news sources confirm your beliefs. Your preferences get mirrored back to you so often that you stop questioning where they came from. That's the 21st century vat. And most of us are in it. Comfortably, willingly, because it feels good. It feels familiar. It feels like the truth. But the brain in a vat thought experiment reminds us that feeling real doesn't make something real. And that's terrifying, because it means that the foundations of knowledge, identity, and meaning might all be sitting on unstable ground. You might wonder, what's the point then? If I can't know what's real, how can I live? But maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the point isn't to escape the vat. Maybe it's to act as if you're in one and build your life accordingly. Assume your senses can be wrong. Assume your beliefs might be planted. Assume your memories could be manufactured. And then, despite all that, choose to be kind. Choose to be curious. Choose to seek understanding. Because if you do that, then even if you're in a vat, you're still living with purpose, still making choices, still pushing against the boundaries of your container. That's what makes you human, not your body, not your environment. Your defiance, your refusal to surrender your mind to the machinery around it. So maybe the vat isn't a prison. Maybe it's a challenge, a dare, a reminder to stay awake, even when the dream feels sweet. Because whether this world is real or not, your choices still echo, even through wires, even in the dark. Eternal return. The eternal return isn't just a question. It asks, what if this life, every second of IT's, something you'll live over and over again, endlessly? Every breath, every heartbreak, every victory, every mistake. Not just remembered, not just retold, but relived forever. Nietzsche introduced this concept not as a theory, but as a test, times more. Every pain, every joy, every thought, every sigh must return to you all in the same succession and sequence. If that idea crushes you, maybe you're not living the life you should be. But if you embrace it, you'd gladly do it all again. Loop like that. But the thought still has teeth because it turns life into a mirror. Would you be proud to live this day again? Numbing, waiting, putting things off. But the eternal return says there's no later, no someday. Imagine being trapped in your worst year. Imagine watching yourself make the same bad choice with the same awful consequences forever. That would be hell. But here's the flip side. It can also be freedom. If nothing is wasted, if even your worst days are part of the loop, then maybe every moment matters more than you think. Maybe every interaction, every decision, every small kindness echoes across eternity. This isn't about fear. It's about intensity. The eternal return forces you to live deliberately, to stop waiting for better circumstances or perfect timing, because if time loops, then the best time to fix your life, to say the thing, to take the leap is now, always now. But here's where it cuts deeper. Suppose you don't get to choose. Suppose the loop is already happening. Suppose this isn't the first time you've lived this exact life. You've had this conversation before. You've asked these questions before. You've sat in this room, thought these thoughts, stared at this same sentence before. Would that change anything? Would it make your decisions feel heavier? Would it make your regrets feel more permanent? Or would it make you do something unpredictable, something wild, just to break the pattern? That's the existential tension. How do you keep showing up knowing you'll do it all again? Maybe the answer is you don't try to escape it. You dive into it. You stop chasing novelty and start refining. What already exists, that's what mastery is. After all, doing the same thing again and again with slightly more intention each time. Maybe the eternal return isn't punishment. Maybe it's refinement, life as a forge. You as the blade, and every loop sharpens. Every loop sharpens you if you're willing to be honest about where you're dull. Or maybe it's just a metaphor. No loop. Maybe time flows forward, messy and unrepeating. It still asks, if you knew you had to live this exact life again, would you change how you're living it now? And if the answer is yes, what are you waiting for? Exposes how many of us live as if time is infinite, as if we'll get a second run. We won't, and that means we should live like every moment counts because it does. Whether or not the loop exists, you're still here, still breathing, still choosing. And that's enough. Infinite library. The infinite library is also known as the Library of Babel, and it's one of the most quietly unsettling paradoxes you'll ever encounter. The idea is simple. Imagine a library that contains every possible book that can be written. Not just every known book, but every possible combination of letters, every arrangement of punctuation, every page that could ever exist. That means every truth, every lie, every biography. The sheer scale of it is incomprehensible. And the kicker is this. Almost all the books are gibberish, nonsense, unreadable word salad. But hidden in that infinite sea of chaos are books that make perfect sense by accident. Or maybe not by accident, maybe by inevitability. That's the paradox. When you have infinite combinations, every possible pattern must appear somewhere. Your autobiography, it's there. Word for word, the next great novel already exists. Book that describes your entire life in brutal, exact detail, including your death, also in the library. But here's where it gets strange. So is a version that's totally wrong. One where you never existed. One where you became someone else. One where everything went differently. And they're all equally valid because, in the infinite library, probability and meaning split apart. Every truth is buried in an avalanche of almost truths, and the more you search, the less you know. Row after row, floor after floor, billions of shelves. Each one packed with volumes you can't possibly read in a lifetime more. Even 1,000 lifetimes. You open one book, gibberish. Another, almost a story, but not quite. Another, your name, your birthday, your secrets, your thoughts. And then it's gone. A page that repeats one word forever. A chapter in a language that doesn't exist. A book where every character is just the letter E. You start to doubt not just the library, but your mind. Borges, who imagined the library, said people would go mad trying to find meaning. Some would wander forever looking for the book of truth. Others would burn books that made too much sense, convinced they were false idols. Some would become religious about random volumes, interpreting every comma as divine. Others would lose the will to read at all, because when everything is written, nothing matters. When all answers exist, they cancel each other out. You get overwhelmed by choice, paralysis by possibility. You stop searching, not because there's no meaning, but because there's too much. This isn't just fiction. The internet is a kind of infinite library. Every fake and every fact. You search for truth and you find, and just like the library, it's easy to get lost. To fall down rabbit holes, to think you've found something sacred when it's just one of a trillion random alignments. And it makes you wonder, what is knowledge, really? That's the terrifying beauty of the infinite library. It strips away the idea that meaning is fixed. It says, maybe meaning isn't found, it's made. You don't find the right book. You choose one, you read it, you believe it, you live by it. That's what gives it power. Not its truth, but your decision to treat it as true. It's a commentary on how we all navigate life. We pick values, beliefs, narratives, and we call them truth not because they're the only truth, but because we have to choose something to stand on. The paradox is that infinite knowledge doesn't lead to clarity. It leads to confusion. And sometimes, choosing a single narrative, flawed as it may be, is the only way to stay sane. The infinite library is both a mirror and a maze. It shows you the cost of infinite freedom. It asks, if every version of reality is written, how? Do you decide which one to live in? And the answer might be, you don't find meaning. You create it. The hallucinatory reality. Here's a question that sounds absurd until you really sit with it. What if reality itself is a hallucination? Not in the metaphorical sense. Not life is a dream or the world is an illusion in some poetic way. Literally a hallucination. Engineered and maintained by your brain every second you're alive. That's the idea behind the hallucinatory reality, and it's not just philosophical. It's grounded in neuroscience. Your brain doesn't show you the world. It shows you its prediction of the world. You're not perceiving reality as it is, you're experiencing a real-time simulation created inside your skull. Your eyes don't record images like cameras. They deliver fragments, light, color, shapes. Your brain fills in the gaps. Your ears don't perfectly reproduce sound. They relay vibrations. Your brain decides what those vibrations mean, and your sense of self. That voice in your head, your thoughts, your identity, that too, is a kind of internal narrative your brain keeps writing to maintain the illusion of consistency. The hallucination becomes your reality, and because it's so seamless, you don't notice. You can't notice. That's the paradox. You trust your senses because they feel real, but they only feel real because your brain says they are. So what happens when the simulation gets something wrong? Think optical illusions, misheard. Lyrics, déjà vu, phantom limbs. All little glitches in the system that show how fallible perception really is, but most of the time the hallucination works. And that's enough, until it's not. Here's where it gets wild. If reality is a controlled hallucination and brain is hallucinating slightly differently, then shared reality isn't a fixed thing. It's an agreement, a truce between brains. We decide, silently and collectively, what counts as real. That the sky is blue. That time moves forward, that objects stay solid. These aren't fundamental truths, they're neural best guesses. Have been useful for survival, but they can break. In dreams, in psychosis, on psychedelics, in deep meditation, or during trauma. In those moments, the boundaries dissolve, and you're left naked in the machine, watching your brain try to stitch together anything to explain what you're feeling, and sometimes it can't. And that's terrifying, because when the hallucination collapses, so does your sense of self. You realize you're not a person looking at the world. You're a process trying to make sense of electrical signals. And without the usual scaffolding language, memory, identity, it all unravels. What's left is raw experience, intense, strange, and impossible to describe once you come back. That's the thing most people misunderstand about reality. It's not built from the outside in. It's built from the inside out. Your mind isn't a window, it's a projector. And it's been projecting for so long that you forgot the screen was blank to begin with. But this isn't all bad. If reality is a hallucination, then maybe you have more agency than you think. Maybe you can train your hallucination and shape it, improve it, not by forcing the world to change, but by changing how your mind interprets it. That's what therapy does. That's what meditation does. That's what art and music and love all do. They rewire the projector. They feed new signals into the loop. And suddenly, the world feels brighter not because it changed, but because you did. The hallucinatory reality also explains why people see the same situation in completely different ways, why two people can walk through the same room, hear the same sentence, live the same event, come away with totally different memories. They were living in slightly different hallucinations, and neither is more real. They're just ... different. The implication is huge. If we can learn to recognize that we're hallucinating, even a little, we can become more compassionate, less judgmental, less rigid. We stop insisting that our version of reality is the only correct one. We start listening more, questioning more, letting go of the illusion of certainty. The scariest part of this paradox is also the most liberating. If reality is a hallucination, then everything you feel, your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, fixed. They're generated, and that means they can change. Your reality isn't locked. It's flexible. It's up for negotiation. And the more aware you are of that, the less you have to be a prisoner of your own perception. You start hallucinating on purpose, not to deceive yourself, but to build a reality you actually want to live in. One where fear doesn't run the show, one where love isn't a glitch, one where you can say, yes, this is a dream, but I'm the one dreaming it, so sleep well. Whether this world is real or imagined, it's the one you've got. And maybe, just maybe, you can reshape it one thought at a time. The utility monster. The utility monster doesn't kill with claws or teeth it wrecks, morality with math. Picture a being who experiences happiness, not just more intensely than you, but exponentially more. Like if you eat a piece of cake and feel a 5 out of 10 on the joy scale, the utility monster eats that same cake and feels a 5,000, not metaphorically, pleasure into utility at a massively higher rate than any other human or creature. So now the question, if your goal is to maximize total happiness in the world, then that's the foundation of utilitarian ethics. Shouldn't you give everything to the utility monster? All the food, all the medicine, all the resources? Because no matter what you give it, it generates more happiness per unit than anyone else possibly could. Your suffering, worth it. Your discomfort, justified. Because the happiness produced outweighs the pain inflicted. That's what the math says, and that's what makes it terrifying, because it reveals a dark flaw in utilitarianism. That moral rightness is just about maximizing happiness or minimizing pain. In theory, that's clean. In practice, it becomes a horror show. The utility monster turns ethics into a kind of tyranny, one where the most valuable creature by some arbitrary scale of pleasure justifies infinite sacrifice from everyone else. And that's not just uncomfortable, it's inhumane. But here's the kicker. You already live in a world where versions of the utility monster exist. Think of billionaires who argue they deserve more because they produce more value. Or companies that justify paying one executive 1,000 times more than a worker because of impact. The structure might be less obvious, but the logic is the same. Those who generate more utility, whether money, productivity, innovation, etc., deserve disproportionate rewards. The more they're worth, the more they get, and the more others are expected to give up to feed them. It's not about monsters. It's about models of value. And once you accept that maximizing happiness is the only goal, you've opened the door to a world where the individual doesn't matter, only their output does. You might think, well, that's easy, just cap the monster's rewards, create limits. But now you're modifying utilitarianism. You're no longer maximizing happiness or introducing fairness, dignity, equality, things that don't always align with pure math. And that's the real paradox. The utility monster exposes how easily moral systems that seem compassionate can lead to cruelty, how something designed to reduce suffering can end up justifying exploitation. Because math doesn't care about people, it cares about totals. It turns morality into an equation. And if someone out there scores 10,000 happiness points for every dollar, and you only score 1, then according to the system, your loss is nothing. You're expendable. It's chilling, but it's also clarifying, because it forces you to confront what kind of morality you really believe in. Are you okay with sacrifice for the greater good? How much? Who's good? At what cost? Would you let 1,000,000 people suffer just so one monster can be ecstatic? What if that monster is a city, a country, a corporation, a god? And what if you are the monster? If you feel more, achieve more, think more, do, others owe you their comfort. That's the uncomfortable reversal. The utility monster isn't just a critique of utilitarianism. It's a mirror. It shows how easy it is to slip into justifying injustice when you're chasing the abstract dream of more and more happiness, more good, more output. But without boundaries, more turns monstrous. And ethics becomes math without mercy. The simulation argument doesn't ask if we live in a fake reality. It tells you it's the most likely option, not a fringe theory, not a sci-fi scenario, just math, logic, and probability, making an airtight case that your life might be nothing more than code. The argument, made famous by philosopher Nick Bostrom, breaks into 3 possibilities. 1. Humanity never makes it far enough to create hyper-realistic simulations of conscious beings, because we go extinct first. 2. We do make it that far, but we lose interest in creating simulated realities, maybe because of ethics, or boredom, or something we haven't thought of. 3. We do make it, and we run simulations done of them simulating ancient humans, random timelines, even fictional scenarios, all with beings inside who think they're real. Now, here's the gut punch. If option 3 is true, then the number of simulated conscious beings would vastly outnumber the number of biological original humans, by orders of magnitude. So if you're a conscious being, the odds say you're one of the simulated ones. Not the original, not the real. Just a character with higher resolution experiences and a backstory written into your neurons. That's the simulation argument. And it doesn't rely on time travel, or magic, or even current technology. It just plays the odds. If we ever create simulated minds that believe they're real-land, if we run enough of them, then, statistically, you're probably inside one. Now stop. Look around your room. Think about how real it feels. The weight of your body, the light bouncing off your screen, the faint hum of electronics in the background. Everything seems solid, but what if it's just information? What if your room, your body, this thought is all part of a coded environment, designed to be indistinguishable from reality? That's the trick. The simulation wouldn't feel fake. It would feel exactly like this, because it would have to. Otherwise, you'd notice. You'd break the illusion. And the deeper you go, the more disturbing it gets. Because if this is a simulation, then nothing is truly stable. The laws of physics, just consistent rules programmed into the engine. Memory, local storage that can be rewritten. Death may be just a reboot, or deletion, or transfer. Even your sense of self, what you like, what you believe, how you love, could be parameters, configurable variables. The way you reacted to heartbreak might be a scripted outcome. Tied to your character profile, the sense of awe you feel when you look up at the stars might be part of the simulation's emotional package. And then there's the existential layer. If this is a simulation, is someone watching? Are you part of an experiment? A video game, a test, a punishment, a school project in some higher realm of reality? Are your struggles entertainment for someone else? Is your grief meaningful? Or just a statistical outcome? And what happens when the simulation ends? Do you wake up, or do you vanish? Never knowing you were just data. Maybe you're being reset right now and wouldn't know the difference. Maybe the last time you went to sleep, the simulation paused. Maybe the bugs, you notice glitches in memory, weird coincidences, déjà vu aren't in your head. Maybe they're signs the system is unstable, or under maintenance, or testing your awareness. That dream you had last night that felt too real. What if that was an update, a patch, a moment where the simulation lets you slip between layers before pulling you back in? People laugh it off. They say it's just a theory. But then you start seeing it everywhere. The way physics seems oddly elegant, almost like a coding framework. The way time only moves forward. The way reality seems optimized for life, despite the astronomical odds. It starts to feel like world building, like someone made sure it would be playable. And the more you look, the more you wonder you, the protagonist of your simulation. Or just background code, an NPC in someone else's. Reality, the simulation argument doesn't need a final answer. It just needs you to admit the possibility exists. And once you admit that, you never see anything quite the same again. You question everything. You hesitate before trusting your senses. You start thinking in systems, in rules, in code. And sometimes, when everything's too quiet, when the street feels a little too empty, when the lighting looks too perfect, you ask yourself, is this real? Or is this the part where the system is idling, waiting for input? And what if you stop playing your role? Do you break the illusion? Do they pull the plug? Or does the simulation adapt, spinning a new narrative to keep you grounded? You don't. No, that's the worst part. You'll never know. And that unknowing is the true prison, not the wires or the tank or the headset. Just the awareness that you might not be Reland, the certainty that you'll never be able to prove it either. Way.